What is going on, everyone? We are the Cinefanatics. My name is Robert Adams.
I'm Chris Adams.
And it is time for the Marquee. Time to tier rank some stuff again, movie-related, preferably. Tonight, we will be tier ranking MCU villains. So we got 32 villains we got to make our way through. This show will be over in 30 minutes.
That's a villain a minute, and two of those minutes, there's two villains. Math.
Right. That's why we're talking about movies and not talking about math. Let's tier rank our mathematic equations. Pythagorean theorem, S tier. Quadratic formula, screw that thing. F tier that. Anyways.
Right.
As we get started, you don't even remember what the quadratic formula probably is, right?
No.
Yeah. I can't remember. I know what it is. I can't remember.
Yeah. It's the formula that goes with the quadratics.
There you go. Good job. Glad you got A's in math as a kid. Anyways, before we get started, y'all know the YouTube thing, streamlabs.com/cinefanatics. If you have any questions, comments, issues, complaints, or if you would like to let us know where you would rank some of these villains, that's a good place for it to get our attention. So let us know there. Patreon.com/cinefanatics. If you feel that we are worthy of your support and you have the means to support us, please hop on the tier that is good for you. There's a $1 tier, $5 tier. No matter which tier you are on, you get access to our Discord, including the Marquee channel, which we have a list of all of the villains that we are tier ranking tonight. So if you wanted to make your own list ahead of time and keep track and play along, if you have access to the Discord, you'll be able to see them there. So
easy.
Anyways, like I said, we got 32 villains. We got some really good villains. We got some really bad villains in here.
Get it? They're bad.
Which are going to be as bad as the DCEU villains. So let's see if you want to stir the pot a bit. I mean, come on. Steppenwolf.
What were they? Bad version of Flash.
That instead of it being a completely different person, it's just Flash.
No, Kristen Wiig.
Oh. Yes.
just Kristen Wiig.
Anyway,
she's not playing a character. It's just Kristen Wiig.
I'm not going to sit here and complain about the DCEU villains. There were some good ones. Give me a minute.
Orm.
Black Manta. Zod was good.
Zod.
Anyways, we found some. No need to continue on this. Let's move on to what we're actually doing tonight. Let's go over the rules. Johnny, what's the rules?
There are no rules tonight. This rule list is incorrect. It's a free-for-all.
Hey, Johnny, you might want to get that looked at, man.
A little chloroseptic, clear that up.
Please put on a mask.
Thank you, Casey Jones.
Thank you. Well, you heard Johnny. It's a free-for-all, apparently.
Yep. No rules. Even though you saw the rules, that was the original plan was rules. But you know what? These are all villains, and villains don't like rules.
Johnny made a choice. He made a choice for us. No rules.
Going back to talking about DC villains, the only life worth living is a life without rules or something like that. I'm misquoting it. Whatever it was the Joker said.
Okay.
The only way to live life is a life without rules. And today you're going to break your one rule. So, no rules. They can go anywhere we want. So this will be fun. Anything else? So typically I would put up like the now showing with it showing all of the villains. There's 32 of them. And I did not have the brain capacity to figure out how to get all 32 of them to fit on one screen. So I got halfway through it. I was like, screw it. I'm not doing it. So moving on. We're going to do all 32. They're all going to be pretty much in release order somewhat. So
yeah, so if you know the MCU release order, then you know which villain we're doing next.
And there's going to be some that are not on here.
Yeah, there are some movies that feature more than one villain. We're doing what is widely considered the main villain for these movies, and then there are even some movies that we don't have any villains featured, namely like Eternals. I bring this up as an example. Name the main villain of Eternals.
I mean, there's Crow, there's like Erisham, the Celestials. At one part, there's also Icarus. Who knows? There's not one single villain. Kind of the same with like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, technically Ghost is a villain, but I would say she's not much of a villain. She's just desperate for help. So she's not really villainous.
A sympathetic antagonist.
And then you got Sonny Birch, who's not really antagonistic enough for him to actually matter. He's more of like a fly.
He's an unsympathetic doofy.
Yeah. So not really a villain per se for that movie. But yeah, stuff like that. Anyways, let's go ahead and get the board out here. Carl, hit it. I'm always like over here doing like.
You gotta love Carl. He's not villain looking at all.
No, villain. Carl's a great guy. Like Carl. Guys, this is the board. This is the Marquee tier board. Those of y'all who are familiar with this, you know how this works. If you're not familiar with this, if you've heard of tier ranking or like the tier maker website, basically we're going to rank these in order from S being superb to F being frick. Why did you choose to be a supervillain? Why couldn't you just be a hero? You might have actually been a better person. Or I guess that's what F stands for. F could stand for whatever you want it to stand for, even if it doesn't begin with the word F or letter F word. Anyways, so that is what we are doing tonight. We're going to go through these one at a time. Is there any questions? Is this clear? We got it all?
I think we're good.
Okay.
We're not going to do a poll.
Okay. That will work. So let's move on to our first villain. Kicking off the MCU. Makes sense to start with him first. We got Obadiah Stane. Or the dude, however you want to call him. I do find that weird where Iron Man calls Thor Lebowski in Endgame. I mean, if he's familiar with Lebowski, that Lebowski guy looks a little strange.
So I think what's interesting about this, that's a complete side note tangent real quick, is that I think in the MCU, these iconic characters that are played by the actors who are starring as the superheroes and villains, they're actually played by somebody else in the MCU.
Yeah, like the Big Lebowski is probably played by like Michael Douglas. Well, no, it can't be Michael Douglas because then that would look like Hank Pym. God damn it. Why is everyone who's an actor nowadays in the MCU in some form or fashion?
Right.
Or if they're not, they're about to be.
That's weird that Mace Windu looks a lot like Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Henry Cavill.
So, yeah, Obadiah Stane, our first villain in all of the MCU. This is one of those situations where I think if you know the bad guys, if you know the comics, you saw it coming from a mile away. You knew Obadiah Stane was the villain. I, at the time of Iron Man's release, was not familiar enough, I guess, with the name Obadiah Stane. I knew that the villain of the movie was going to be Ironmonger, but I was not familiar with knowing who was going to be inside the Ironmonger outfit. So I think that it was actually kind of a surprise to a degree for me when he turned out to be the main bad guy of the movie. But anyone who read comics, knew comic books, they weren't surprised.
About to say, really? Because, like, I guess I'm not going to be judgmental fully on that.
I didn't know the name Obadiah Stane. Well, you have to know that name before you know if he's the bad guy.
Sort of. Well, the reason for the really, and I can reel this back a little bit because this is a thing where, like, it's setting up the trope where the villain is, like, the same as the hero, just the evil opposite. He's a rich businessman. He's bald. He also has a giant suit of armor. Like, this was the beginning of that kind of thing. I don't know if that trope necessarily had fully been explored before. I'm trying to quickly think of, like, all the other major comic book movies. I mean, the closest I guess we got was, like, Venom in Spider-Man 3. That was, like, the evil opposite of Spider-Man. Otherwise, Yeah, most of them, I think the villains were pretty much their own character and not borrowing.
Right.
But this is going to be a trope that's going to pop up a lot as we go through the MCU.
I think the big thing the MCU has with this is that there's like a duality between this person on a bad day could have been the bad guy, but instead chose to be the hero, whereas the other individual chose to be the bad guy. It's a duality. They're two characters who are looking in the mirror at each other and realizing that they both picked the different path, even though they're the same person.
Yeah, two heads of the same coin, basically.
Exactly. And that's kind of that is kind of what you had with Obadiah Stane here.
The other thing I'm going to quickly mention a little bit behind the scenes, as I was creating these images for this, I was trying to pick like the background color to be as close to what I think like the color of their character. Surprisingly for villains, and this isn't like, there might be a part of it that's my own personal bias towards this color, but a lot of these, the background's going to be purple. Villains like the color purple for some weird reason. It's royalty. It's a royal color, so that would kind of make sense. But
I would have thought he would have been like maybe a darker red, like a darker Iron Man, or more of like the gray steel, which is the color of the Ironmonger suit.
Well, I was also trying to pick a color that would help like make the actual character image stand out. Because once I shrank these down and start listing them in their tiers, it's going to be hard to see. Tony Stark built this tier list in a cave.
Well, I'm sorry, sir. I'm not Tony Stark.
No, you're just a dumb little kid who is going to shoot his eye out with a BB gun.
Anyway, Obadiah Stane, aptly played well by Mr. Jeff Bridges. I think he was actually a really good villain. I mean, the movies, a lot of these superhero movies, and we're getting a lot of like the commonality stuff out of the way first with Obadiah. A lot of these superhero movies are only as good as the threat the villain provides our heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And Obadiah was set up from the beginning as a close to home threat for Tony Stark. Just as much as there's the shrapnel in Tony's heart, Obadiah Stane is also close to Tony's heart, just based on proximity of growing up and, Obadiah in relation to Howard Stark and what his position was in the company. Obadiah was somebody that Tony loved. And so he's just a close to home, a close to the heart villain to be able to turn on Tony and, backstab him basically. And I think Jeff Bridges played this character fantastically.
Yeah. Yeah. And to add to what you were saying, this is great for like the beginning for an origin movie. But if they were to introduce him later, after all the Avengers, he'd get his ass handed to him easily.
Oh, yeah. Imagine he made the Ironmonger suit after Tony Stark had already made the suit that he had in Endgame with the nanotech and all that.
Yeah.
So
thank you for stopping by, Rachel. See you later.
Yeah. I have him in the B tier. I think he's just B tier. B tier for me is just a very solid villain. Not like the upper echelon. There's nothing like that we need to take home and think about with Obadiah Stane, like there's going to be in some of these other villains that I have in the S and the A tier. But B tier wise, he's just a really solid villain.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with that. I mean, I'm almost half tempted to want to put him in A, but that's coming from the point of view of at the time that Iron Man came out, he was the perfect villain for an origin movie. So in the bubble of we're just looking at that 2008 Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
I mean, technically he would be S because there's no one else to compare him to, but I think he might be an A tier. I'm okay with B because I'm thinking now that we are in 2024, very far removed from when the MCU started in 2008. I think there's probably a lot more villains that I would consider A tier on the whole, rather than keeping it in the bubble of the individual movie.
They've really done a good job building up future villains and building upon them.
Yeah, there might be a couple of these that I will still judge it based on the bubble of them in that one movie, but I mean, this is going to be, again, kind of,
It's free for
we're
all.
going to be flying by the seat of our pants on this kind of thing. It's a free for all. I agree with B. B sounds good. Next one, 2008's The Incredible Hulk, Abomination.
Staying in 2008.
Yeah. I love that both like Abomination is leaning in from the right side while Obadiah Stane was leaning in from the left side. And I know I'm holding my hands and emphasizing this backwards because of lenses and cameras and stuff. So
We don't have time for this.
Yep. So there's the first 30 minutes just talking about Obadiah Stane alone. Abomination. They needed to put Abomination in the Hulk movie. I love the fact that we got him. He doesn't quite look like his comic book counterpart, but I think they got across the fact that like Tim Roth was playing him kind of crazy and unhinged and a threat before he mutated. So I like what they did with him. I think they did a pretty good job with him, and I liked what they've done with him since, like in the She-Hulk show.
Yeah.
I'll call him a C tier, though. I don't feel like we didn't get to see enough of him, of his character, for him to really breathe until we got She-Hulk. And by that point, he's not really playing a villain, which is okay. I like, just give me Tim Roth in any form. I don't care. But yeah, as far as a villain goes, he's C tier. Again,
yeah, I mean, as far as a character goes, he doesn't really have like a whole lot of motivation for anything. He's a soldier who wants to play matchup with Hulk's strength, and so
once again, the evil version of the hero.
Between taking the super soldier serum and then getting a little bit of that radiated blood in him, he became what he is. I think that. We do dock points a little bit for the fact that he doesn't, comic book purists over here, he doesn't 100% look like his comic book counterpart. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. He just kind of exists. They did do a good job changing up how he looks in She-Hulk, though. I think they did a great one-to-one from comic book to screen there. But as far as his villainy goes, he was just, and that's the thing with Hulk, is you just need someone who can be a also large punching bag, who can hit Hulk like Hulk's a large punching bag. That's really all you need for Hulk. You're not looking for someone who has depth to their character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm on the same boat. We might be on the same boat for quite a few of these, but yeah, there's just not a whole lot to Abomination other than size and strength. So C tier as well. Good matchup for Hulk, but that's about it.
I would say I'd give him credit in the fact that Emil Blonsky is a tactical genius, but there's definitely a part of him that seems to like lose himself after he turns into the Abomination. So
yeah, he's tactical, but they don't really show any of that in the movie. He just turns into the big green rage monster and starts tearing up Harlem.
Yeah, like when they're on the campus, he takes it upon himself, even though people are yelling at him to like stand down. He takes it upon himself to engage with the Hulk when you should be trying to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah,
he just let ego take over, and he's like, "I want that power." So yeah,
we're
evil version of the hero.
We're talking about ego later.
Yeah, good one. Next one. I mean, I know this is Iron Man heavy because the first couple of MCU movies, that was Iron Man, just capitalizing off Iron Man. So we got Whiplash. I decided to put Whiplash in and not Justin Hammer because Justin Hammer's kind of like a know-nothing character. Whiplash was the ultimate motivation of the villain of the villain side of that movie.
I'll save us some time. If you have a question as to why one villain's in the movie over or in this list over another villain from the movie, it's because we're featuring the main villain. Whiplash was the main villain of Iron Man 2.
Yeah, I care more about who posed who was the bigger threat, not who was the character bankrolling the bigger threat.
So here's the thing. The redeeming qualities to Whiplash, Mickey Rourke did a good job playing the role. What role there was. Other redeeming quality, Bird.
Justin Hammer got to give Tony Stark an Oscar. He's playing the long game.
Yes.
The whole time. You can see like our Oscar watch along that we did this past Sunday, so go check that out. I don't know why anyone would now that the Oscars aren't live, but the whole time we're doing that, we're like, I would love it if he introduced Robert Downey Jr. as Anthony. If he would just call him Anthony just once, that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the other redeeming quality was Bird. So I don't want to roll over my humorous take on that word there.
My bird.
He's Bird. And he's got some sympathetic side to him. Like, obviously, he's going at it from what the Stark family did to his family. And so he actually has like some real solid motivation. But that being said, that's about it. That motivation's there, but it's thin. It's a thin motivation. It's just vengeance, and he is just another version of Iron Man, just like we've had before, except he's a less, I would say he's a less than version of Iron Man. The whips were cool, but that's about it. I don't think that there's a whole lot to the character of Whiplash to write home about. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if most people forgot he was the villain of Iron Man 2. For that reason, I'm putting him in the D tier, especially as we compare him to many of the other villains on this list who are eons better villains than Whiplash was.
Yeah. So the thing with him is he's actually an amalgamation of two separate characters.
Yeah.
There is the Whiplash character, and then there's the Crimson Dynamo. Crimson Dynamo in the comics was Anton Vanko, which is Ivan Vanko's father. And then Backlash is actually a completely different person altogether who used whips, but not necessarily in the same way, like trying to recreate an Iron Man suit. So I think they did a good job with trying to combine those characters. I don't recall if they've done that with any other characters throughout the rest of the MCU. I think this is really the only time we've taken like two characters and kind of mixed them together. So I don't think the problem with that is I don't think they necessarily nailed either one. They created their own character based off of the ideas of the other two. I think they did a good job with this character as it's portrayed on screen, but they just really didn't flesh him out any more than just the good basic you killed my father, prepare to die type of thing. I am Ivan Vanko or whatever. Yeah. What did you put him at? You put him D?
D, yeah. Because there are still other villains that I think are worse than him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's the absolute bottom of the barrel, but that fight at the end of Iron Man 2 was over in 2 seconds, and I wanted something more. If he posed more of a bigger threat at the end of the movie, I would probably put him higher, but
yeah, I think you're convincing me of that as well. There's aspects of him that I think could be really good, but
we just didn't dive into him enough. He got a good setup, but not a good follow through.
Yeah. Anyways, next one.
Dude survived being hit with the ex-wife.
Nice, yeah. Loki. S tier. I don't need to explain this. I really don't feel like I need to explain this. This is S tier villain.
Let me see what I have on my list. Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, let me explain one part. And Loki is a good example. I'm glad that he's here early because this is going to pop up at least one other time, kind of in the reverse. And I'll say that when we get to it. It's going to be much later. But we are only focused on the villain aspects of these characters. Yes, Loki is now more of an anti-hero. Actually, by the end of Loki season 2, I would actually call him a hero.
Just straight up, yeah.
But for the most part, like specifically here, he's here at this time because he was the villain of Thor. He was the villain of the first Avengers movie. We're only looking at his villainous side. He did villainous things in Thor: The Dark World and slightly villainous in Ragnarok. but that's roughly about it.
Barely.
Yeah. So, as far as like a villain, really only focusing on the first Thor and Avengers, S tier. They did such a good job on this character. Like, I never had heard of Tom Hiddleston before this, and Loki was one of my favorite characters from the comics. I love that they nailed the characterization with Tom Hiddleston right off the bat. And it was also anyone who may know me knows I like the Hot Toys figures. If you can see like my room here, I got like shelves of Hot Toys over here off to the side. Loki was the first one I bought. So I love this character. They did a great job. S tier.
So let me see what I have in my notes. So Loki is...
I know what you have in your notes.
Yeah, he's S tier. Yeah. Yeah, put him in S tier. He is the MCU's first real great villain. And that's even like taking into consideration what he did in Thor. Like, I would say that if they had just left him to Thor, the first Thor movie, and then didn't do anything with him later on, he would probably be up there with Obadiah Stane. He'd probably be solidly in the B tier. And that would be the end of the day on Loki. But what they did with him going from Thor into Avengers and the time that he had to breathe on screen in Avengers, I really think that solidifies his S tier. Now, if we're talking about just characters as a whole too, which I know we're not, yeah, he's still in the S tier. Just everything Loki is S tier.
Yeah. God, that was such good casting.
Yeah. And Tom Hiddleston, yeah. We didn't know who he was. Turns out he was the best pick for that role.
If at any time I ever hear anyone possibly questioning if Feige is slipping or knows what he's doing or whatever, that right there. You didn't know who Tom Hiddleston was before Thor, and you'll never forget him ever again.
Yep. So,
next one. Red Skull. You want to start?
Oh, you don't want to start this one?
I mean, I could, but I'm trying to figure out the balance of I started the last one, you started this one.
Here's the thing. I like doing the let's get the good out of the way before we talk about the bad.
Mm-hmm.
The good. Hugo effing Weaving. Literally the best cast for this role.
There's a second person that's good also.
Yeah, second best cast would be Ross Marquand.
Yeah, because you could not tell that was not Hugo Weaving.
He did an excellent Hugo Weaving impression.
Yeah.
2, look at him. This is one of those situations where it's like, how are they going to translate this character from comic to screen? Look at him. They did such a great job translating Red Skull from comic book to screen. He looks amazing. The prosthetics, the little bit of CGI they needed to do to his face, everything. He looks fantastic. He sounded fantastic. He acted fantastic. He embodied Red Skull. They did such a great job creating the character of Red Skull from comic book to screen. I just wish they did more with him.
That was like the only negative is he's only in the one movie, basically.
They brought him back in Endgame or
Infinity War and
Endgame, and gave him a little bit to do, which was cool.
Yeah,
it was cool. But this is Captain America's arch enemy. Where the heck is all of my Red Skull? All in the one movie? Really?
I would have liked to have seen him possibly come back. Like maybe even in Winter Soldier, make it like come to find out he was still in charge of Hydra. He managed to find his way back from wherever the Tesseract sent him, and then figure out another way to still make him the keeper of the Soul Stone.
Yeah.
In Infinity War. But yeah, that really the only negative is we just didn't get to see him ever again as a villain.
It really is. That's why for me, like I said with Loki, if they had just left Loki off with Thor, he'd probably be in the B tier as being just a solid antagonist for the hero. And likewise, they left him off with just Captain America: The First Avenger. He's a really solid antagonist for Captain America, and they didn't do anything else with him. He's B tier for me.
This should have been a thing. I wanted to see Steve Rogers go back to, was it Vormir, and run into him and be like, oh shit. The hell are you doing here?
Hey, bud, it's been a minute.
Where you went?
What are you doing here?
Long time no see, literally.
Hello, Captain Rogers.
Yeah. So where would you put him?
B tier.
B?
Yeah.
Oh man, I would almost be tempted to put him in S had they given him more to do.
That was my point.
He was perfect.
That was my point. That's what I just said. Loki would be in a B tier if all they did was just leave Loki to only the first Thor movie and do nothing else with him.
I kind of want to put him in A.
I feel like that's too high for Red Skull. He just did not have enough to do.
So I'll tell you what, I'll put him in B, but this is one we're going to revisit, and this is one I'm probably going to argue with to push up to A. Let's wait and see who else we have to talk about and where they rank.
We're going to flip a coin tonight. It's a free-for-all.
I'm also not necessarily going to care what order they are in their rank. Like, I don't know.
I will.
I was going to say, I probably would put Red Skull above Obadiah Stane just because he's so much better as the comic book counterpart.
The only reason I don't is because of...
You still want to put Red Skull under Obadiah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of what Obadiah meant, what his story was, what he meant, his motivation, everything, what he meant to like Tony and all of that. I think there's a greater story and motivation behind him than Red Skull. I just want power.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will revisit this again as per usual. We will come back in, probably rearrange some of these after the whole thing is done. Next one. Killian.
Yeah. Kind of jumping ahead here. Oh no, No, because Loki was Avengers. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
We were at Iron Man 3. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Killian. I mean, this is a character that was extremely changed from the comics. In the comics, Killian really wasn't a bad guy. He was the creator of Extremis, but he also died fairly early in the Extremis storyline. So they took a lot of liberties with this character, and again, I think they were trying to play all three Iron Man movies. I think the villains are essentially trying to play as the antithesis of Tony in some form or fashion. Each one are like just heightened aspects of the reverse of individual pieces of Tony Stark, whether it's him being a millionaire, him being a tech genius, him being Iron Man, like all these different aspects. And like the movie plays out with him being the stereotypical nerd with greasy hair and glasses and hunched over with like canes and stuff. And then, oh, he's beautiful. Just fix his hair, remove the canes, and take off the glasses. And look at him. He's the gorgeous Guy Pearce. Okay. I don't know. Like, he really wasn't that much of a threat. I mean,
the extremist side of things was very much a threat. I argue against that. I would say actually the extremist side of it all was actually a big deal, especially because look what he did to Pepper.
Extremists, not him.
He created extremists.
But it went the way that he wasn't expecting it. Like, he wasn't expecting people to die.
He didn't care either. The other side of it too is not only was he the creator of extremists, but also this goes back to what you were saying before of we're going to take a couple different characters and mesh them together at the time, not what we now know in the future, but at the time, they played up him as essentially the Mandarin. that whole line at the end, I am the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Like that at the time, that was kind of like, okay. Of course, we come to find out later on that there was a real Mandarin. There was a real individual.
After Marvel's like, oops.
We should have had that actual character in there somewhere. For him, I don't have him all the way at the bottom. I don't have him anywhere close to the top. I put him in C tier myself.
I put him in D.
I put him in C because I think he was actually a threat, and I like these Iron Man villains as individuals who kind of show off the darker parts of Tony Stark in different ways. Where you've got Obadiah Stane, being the weapons monger, the iron monger, the weapons manufacturer side. You've got Whiplash being, the sins of his father, essentially, and what happened there. And then you've got Killian, who is what could happen if, everything goes awry, or if you take the genius that is Tony Stark and you push him in the other direction, then you've got Killian. So I like him in that role. And again, like he actually did threaten Tony Stark's heart with Pepper and what he did to Pepper at that time in the movie. So I do hold him in the C tier, but I absolutely would not put him any higher than that.
Yeah, I really want to put him in D.
Again, he's one of those that we could probably like shift around. We might look and go like, wow, I actually kind of want to shift this person up now, looking at them all together, or this person down, looking at them all together.
We're not going to have any problems with this next one. Malekith, F. Good Lord. I'm going to be honest. Malekith is kind of an F tier villain, even from the comics. Like, I never understood or got this character. They just made him like a weird, like in the comics, he's almost like Joker levels of crazy. And the movie just went full serious and almost Shakespearean with him. And the closest we got to like any kind of like a comic book look is when he got like half of his face burned in like the third act of the movie. I like Christopher Eccleston. I absolutely really love Christopher Eccleston.
The casting is good.
But the characterization is just terrible. And the motivation is some generic when the planets align powers and yada yada. All it was a vehicle for us to get introduced to the ether, to the reality stone, which I don't know how we turned a liquid into a stone, but who cares? I don't make enough money to question that. But Malekith just, oh God, what a terrible villain. F this villain.
Yeah. This is an example of wasted potential. Because I would argue that, maybe Malekith in the comics was also pretty bad, but there's still a whole lot that you could do with him in terms of, I didn't say he's S tier for me. What are you doing?
You're going to say F.
There's still probably a whole lot that they could have done with him in a movie form. That they just this is the example of, we just need someone to fill bad guy shoes for this movie. Thor 2 needs a bad guy. Malekith. Yeah, let's do him.
We both did the same exact thing at the same time.
It's Malekith. Yeah, for sure. If you go back and you watch that Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, Malekith in that is way better.
Yeah.
I would argue that he's a much better character in that cartoon than he was in the movies. Christopher Eccleston, great cast. Squandered cast. Could have done a whole lot more with him in that role. And I think there's a whole lot more you could have just done with the Dark Elves in general. Do some more of the like I said, the sins of the father type situation, and what did Odin do to his people kind of a thing, or the past, whoever came before Odin, whatever timeline it was.
Yep.
F.
Next one. Alexander Pierce.
Wait.
Ooh, I should have brightened him. He's hard to see on this background. I should have turned up
blue.
the brightness on him.
Die.
Yeah, so I put Alexander Pierce in here instead of the Winter Soldier because the Winter Soldier ultimately is, first of all, he's brainwashed. So he's not, I wouldn't say he should be responsible for the things that he did. And that's actually a point that they make in Civil War. But I wouldn't necessarily say that Winter Soldier Bucky is the villain of that movie. I think Alexander Pierce really is the one pulling the strings behind everything. Technically, I would also probably still say maybe Arnim Zola and Hydra, but as far as who we can actually see and possibly punch, Alexander Pierce.
Yeah, I mean, Winter Soldier really was just muscle. That's all he amounted to be. Obviously, there's the connection. There's the heart connection to Steve.
Yeah,
who Bucky was, his best friend and everything. But for the most part, Winter Soldier didn't have motivation. He was just muscle being sent on jobs, essentially. So I wouldn't qualify him necessarily in that case as the main villain. But Alexander Pierce being the puppet master, essentially, and then expertly played by Robert Redford. This was at the time when Robert Redford had already retired from acting. And then he popped up in Winter Soldier as the main villain, and we're like, yes, the MCU got Robert Redford. Okay, the MCU is serious. We're serious here, people. Yeah, exactly.
Got to do the Robert Redford. I still can't believe that that's Robert Redford. It looks nothing like Robert Redford.
Yeah, younger.
The Jeremiah Johnson meme gif.
The gif, yeah. Anyway, yes, Alexander Pierce. I think as a puppet master, as someone who he was an intimidating threat without having to flex up on anybody.
Yeah,
he was somebody who was effectively able to put Nick Fury in his place without having to flex up on him, and that's pretty dang special. I don't put him in the S tier because I think there's still S tier. I relegate to very specific villains. Who are just a notch above everybody else, but damn it, he's A tier. He's definitely A tier for me.
I 100% agree. Next one. We're already pretty far deep into the MCU by this point. We're already jumping to 2014? Ronan the Accuser.
Woo!
If you'd like to start.
I would say, again, from comics to screen, not a bad job. Not a bad job adapting Ronan and how he looks in the comic books to the screen. Lee Pace, also really good choice. He's got a booming intensity to him that really filled out Ronan very nicely. And that's it. I like Ronan's standoff against Thanos. I think that part was good. It was good for his character. But Ronan as a whole, his motivation being, I just want to see Xandar suffer. Why? Yeah. Because of what the Xandarian people have done to my people. If we had explored more of the Kree versus Xandarians type situation, if we explored more of that up until this point, which obviously we weren't going to because Guardians of the Galaxy was kind of our first foray into the cosmic side of Marvel. If we got any more depth on that, then I think that you would have a greater motivation. You'd have a stronger case for this character and who he is. But I just don't feel like we had enough from him. And then, of course, a lot of these villains in that time, he was the one and done. He had his movie and he was offed at the end of the movie, and that was it. So we didn't get a whole lot more from Ronan. As far as I know he made a minor appearance in Captain Marvel, but that's about it. So for me, he's sitting solid, maybe C tier.
I can see that. I can agree with that. Yeah, I think they did a good job with his character. He's a lot more of a threat in the comics than he was in Guardians of the Galaxy. But I do like at least they went as far as making him go against Thanos, defy the Mad Titan, and take the Power Stone for himself.
That part, yeah, I think that part is the biggest redeeming quality to his character.
Causing Thanos to do his best impression of the tall man from the Phantasm movies. Boy! Love it. But yeah, I agree. C tier. Sounds good. So we're going to divert away for a bit from the movies. And now that this is canon within the MCU, Kingpin. Vincent D'Onofrio is inspired casting. It is perfect casting. He does a phenomenal job. I've always, like, as a kid, I'm trying to think they can never do Kingpin in live action because you just can't. Kingpin is a big, wide, he's not necessarily fat. He's just a wide person. And I love the fact that while you can't do that in live action, and it, like, as much as I like Into the Spider-Verse, the version of Kingpin they got in that is just goofy looking. It's just that one's a little too outrageous. I really like Vincent D'Onofrio in this role. And I like the fact that you watch anything else Vincent D'Onofrio does. First of all, he is phenomenal at characterization. Go look at his character in Full Metal Jacket, Private Pile. Completely the exact opposite of Kingpin, and he nails that character. This is a fantastic actor, and he does a phenomenal job of this character. Yes, he's a street level. He's basically a glorified mob boss. Mm-hmm. But I think he conveys the anguish that the character goes through, murdering his own father, who's abusive, with a hammer, and then having to live with that and try to balance out his evil ways versus his need to survive and thrive and be a normal person. His relationship with Vanessa in the Netflix Daredevil show, which apparently is coming back. The character of Vanessa and his relationship. So, like, all of that makes for a fantastic character. Looking at this strictly from the fact that this is a street level villain and not some big, huge villain with powers and world conquering aspirations, I will call him an S tier villain. Easily.
He is the one that I was saying, why isn't he essentially the Loki of the Netflix street level characters, wherein he showed up in Daredevil but wasn't the main bad guy of the Defenders.
Yeah. No, Sigourney Weaver was. Oh, that's right. Sigourney Weaver was in that show.
Yeah. Whereas you had Loki for Thor and Avengers, I feel like Kingpin should have been both.
What a waste of Sigourney Weaver.
One of the greatest decisions modern MCU has done is bring back Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin and Charlie Cox's Daredevil. That is one of the greatest modern choices that they have made because both of them absolutely killed these roles. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you say about Kingpin. He is on the street level. He is the S tier villain. 100%. There's so much emotion and weight, no pun intended, behind his character and just what drives him as a character, I think, is so fascinating and so interesting from a psychological perspective. They put so much depth inside Kingpin, and I think that absolutely, because of the effort behind that character, deserves the S tier. Easy.
Yeah. All right. So next one, going on to Avengers 2, we've got the Age of Ultron. If you'd like to start.
Ultron
I'm actually be right back.
Ultron is, again, we're talking about these characters who kind of show off different parts of Tony Stark. He is effectively, in the case of what they're doing with the MCU, another piece of Tony Stark. Maybe his ego, his hubris, shown forth, essentially. I think there's a lot of things that they messed up on with Ultron, translating him to the movies. I really would have liked to see a more closer to the comics origin for him, but they also, at this point, had not yet introduced Ant-Man or Hank Pym or any of that side of things, so they really couldn't introduce Ultron as who Ultron was in the comics. I think...
But it made sense with how what they have introduced at that point. It worked.
Yes, they did write it well for what was needed. And I do like I do like James Spader. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, yes, it still kind of takes me out of it slightly. That's like, oh, Ultron sounds like James Spader.
And has lips.
Yeah, the mouth is weird. He sounds like James Spader. I was like, okay, but at the same time, James Spader has so much character in just his voice alone that it still works, and it still works very well. I think
you watched Blacklist?
I watched Blacklist for a little bit, but there was a whole a hiccup in how long it took them to get to the next season or something. I fell off. I should go back and watch the whole show. I think the show's done now. So I should go back and watch the whole thing again, because James Spader was fantastic in that show. But I think as a whole, they could have done so much more with Ultron. He basically was just a vehicle for having another faceless army for the Avengers to thrash. That being a bunch of mini Ultrons, which of course, that's the way it works in the comics. That makes sense. But at the same time, I just don't think there was enough depth to him. I feel like they rushed his character a little bit. They sped past a lot of things that would have given him more of a leg to stand on, and just kind of said, oh, he's AI and he's bad. There you
go. Hey, future, let's take note of this. AI, bad. Apparently y'all didn't learn it from the Terminator.
For me, here's how I would have improved Ultron. Here's how you get Ultron to at least the A tier for me. You introduce the idea of Ultron starting in Iron Man 2. And I know we did that kind of with Jarvis. We actually kind of had the groundwork with Jarvis a little bit, but I feel like you introduce a little bit more starting in Iron Man 2, and then you build upon that to get to the second Avengers. And I think by that point, you would have laid the groundwork enough for Ultron. Instead of, we introduced the AI of who Ultron was, and he is immediately veering off the path. We don't even see Ultron yet. We just hear a voice. His conversation with Jarvis when he was born, immediately veering off the path. And I feel like that part was just super rushed. And because of that, I feel like the character itself was rushed. And therefore, I don't think Ultron is as great as they could have been. Like any other villain who I feel like should have had more time, I would put him in the B tier and not any higher.
You said B?
Yeah.
Okay. Ultron. So Ultron is a great example of the problem of translating comic book characters into a movie. Ultron is the type of character that should always be there in some form or fashion. The second that Ultron became sentient, the very first thing he should have done is start planting himself all over the internet.
Yeah.
But they don't do that because they need this to be a villain that's self-contained within the one movie. We need to have him be the villain. We need to kill him off and not worry about Ultron ever again.
And they even explained that they locked him out of the internet too.
Yeah, they had to go so far as to give that reason, because either the comic book fans or anyone who has common sense was going to be like, but he could just escape to the internet and you can't stop him.
Should have done that already.
And that's the way comic books are always playing a long game of some sort. Best example I have is look at Spider-Man. The black costume Spider-Man was introduced in 1984, Secret Wars #8, and then was brought into the Spider-Man storyline proper in was it Amazing Spider-Man 252. It wasn't until 1988, Amazing Spider-Man 300, that they had developed the black costume into becoming Venom. 4 years later, they played the long game. And that's it. Like these movies would be great. Like if we do another Avengers movie and we bring Ultron back, then we would be doing exactly like what the comic books do. These characters come back. Ultron's been a threat for decades in the comics because he's just always there. Loki, always there.
He had a minor appearance in Doctor Strange too.
Sort of. Very sort of.
Sort of.
But I mean that's the thing is his character is an AI robot that could escape to the internet, and I feel like by not letting the characterization of Ultron have that ability, you are severely limiting and fencing in what this villain can do. Yeah. And for a character like Ultron, that severely brings down how threatening they actually are. So you said B tier?
Yep.
I guess.
B tier for me is the tier that you run off to when we could have done so much more with this villain, but they had the one-off and they should have been so much more than they were. But they were still pretty solid for what they did do.
Like, I kind of get that for Obadiah Stane and Red Skull, but Ultron really should be a character that is just a constant presence.
Yeah, these are the characters that should not have been oft in one movie. Is basically a nice summarization of it. Like, I don't care that Whiplash was often one movie. That's fine. He's a one movie kind of a villain.
Ultron really should be a constant presence, though.
Mm-hmm. Red Skull should have been a more constant presence. Obadiah Stane probably could have been served better if he went to prison or something instead of being killed off. But
I like the William Herald. James Spader is S tier. Ultron is bottom of B. Well, that's where he went.
Correct.
So next one. And now we're back into the realm of the villain is the exact opposite of the hero. If my thing wants to work. Yellow Jacket.
Which this one's interesting. Because this is, again, like an amalgamation of different ideas from the comic books into a character in the movie.
Yeah, Yellow Jacket is actually, for some weird reason, and I can't remember if the comic books actually said this, the character of Hank Pym in the movies, played by Michael Douglas, was the original Ant-Man, but he also had all these other different names depending on what character he wanted to play. The powers stay the same. He can shrink, he can grow, whatever. But he's been Ant-Man, Yellow Jacket, Goliath. He's been all these other characters of different shapes and sizes and costumes. For some reason, they gave the Yellow Jacket persona to Darren Cross, who I can't remember if that actually is a character from the comic book. So it's kind of weird that they went that direction. On top of that, I also didn't know who Corey Stoll was as an actor before Ant-Man, and he just really wasn't that impressive. Again, by this point, we've already had a couple of these characters, primarily from Iron Man, that are tech versions or villainous tech versions of the hero. So Yellow Jacket, the villainous version of Ant-Man, still has a suit, still shrinks, same thing. And then wanting to use this technology for global population or to make money or profit or whatever off of it. Just there's no real motivation except just wanting to sell this and be a traitor to the country, essentially.
Yeah.
This is Yellow Jacket. I'll give him some credit because he was kind of a threat there for a while, and it had some really good scenes, but I'll give him a D. And that I feel like that's being generous.
I think we have a very interesting thing with this character. First of all, I do agree with you, D tier for him. Secondly, our list is nicely rounded out, top, middle, and bottom by the 3B boys. And what I mean by that is bald, bad businessmen.
Yeah.
You got Kingpin up here, you got Obadiah Stane, who's just right here, and then you've got Yellow Jacket, who's like, oh yeah, we've done this song and dance a number of times already. Literally, Ant-Man is almost an exact like paint by numbers copy of Iron Man. Not exactly, because obviously the power set's different and the characterization of the main hero is different.
But it's tech driven.
But you still have someone who was like doing bad things, who wants to be good now, and his bad guy is just a bad version of himself with the same technology that he's using. He's a bald guy. He's a businessman. He wants power. It's just all, a lot of it is the same as Iron Man. And so Ant-Man, while I do enjoy the movie, that's where you started feeling a little bit of the MCU's. Haven't we been here and done this already? And I think that's a large part of that is, what is Ant-Man's rogues gallery exactly? There's a reason why they created a character and went with Yellow Jacket as a villain, because Ant-Man's rogues gallery, Hank Pym, main Ant-Man, not talking about Scott Lang, Hank Pym, the rogue for Hank Pym is Hank Pym.
Oh.
Hank Pym is his own rogue.
Egghead. Egghead was his like Joker to Batman.
Listen, I'm talking about a more in-depth thing. Hank Pym was characteristically his own bad guy.
It's no surprise to me. I am my own worst enemy.
Yes, he was not a good person in the comic books. So,
which is good because the comics kind of made him like that also, especially in the Ultimates where he's an abusive lover to Wasp.
Yeah, to Janet. Yeah. So yeah, D tier for Yellow Jacket. You really couldn't do much with him. Meh.
Yeah. Let's jump back into the Netflix shows for a bit.
Yes.
Kilgrave.
I made an argument for why I wanted him on this list because I believe he is the only other Netflix bad guy who's worth anything.
Yeah. So behind the scenes, we actually had to talk about this one for a minute. And yeah. I think that is actually it. Between Kingpin and Kilgrave. Kilgrave's the only one on here who is only from the Netflix shows.
Yeah.
So, and that is a testament to how well they did the Purple Man in Jessica Jones. Granted, he's not officially the Purple Man like in comics where he actually has purple skin and whatnot, but they dress him in purple. He has the mind control powers, and I think they did a very good job with him. What's the name of the actor?
David Tennant.
Yeah, David Tennant does a phenomenal job. I will be honest, my only understanding of the Purple Man before Jessica Jones, I don't even remember him from the comics. I remember him from that one episode of X-Men, the animated series, where he's trying to brainwash kids from an orphanage that Cyclops came from. That's it. That's all I remember of the Purple Man. And I think the translation into live action for Jessica Jones, first of all, I think what really helps is they did a good job within the story of that show, setting him up to be evil without actually seeing him. We are conveyed how evil and just how despicable of a person he is from Jessica Jones's point of view, which typically you would look at that and be like, okay, Jessica Jones is playing the unreliable narrator. She's not this person. We're not seeing this person. We just have to take her word at it. And then when we finally get to meet Kilgrave in the show, we're like, oh yeah, Jessica was right this entire time. He's a piece of shit.
He's so much worse than we ever imagined. Yeah, his power set is terrifying.
Yeah. I'm really surprised he's not a bigger villain in the comics just because of that.
I think because they actually I think what they did with him in the comics is they nailed a realistic point of view from him. Somebody of him with that power set would do exactly the things that he did in the comic books, which they only lightly really kind of touched on in the show, because they didn't want to make the show NC-17.
Yeah, when you're, and I'm not a huge fan of talking about this subject on our channel, but I want to mention it just to drive home. This is a character, I think in the show they alluded to his ability to coerce people into a position of raping them.
Basically.
And that is frightening.
Yeah.
The fact that could exist.
He could take away someone's power of consent and basically force them to give consent for whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So they really dived pretty deep into that in the comic books with that character. Not as much into the show, but enough in the show that you were like, oh yeah, this guy's bad.
Not the X-Men cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. He also does appear as well, like I said, and like I mentioned before, that Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Very different line of reasoning for his appearance in there. He's very much trying to, use heroes for his own benefits.
Which is the family-friendly version of a supervillain in a
no, that's
superhero cartoon.
It's more of the these guys have powers and I want to use their powers to maintain power myself kind of thing. And then of course the David Tennant of it all. David Tennant is David Tennant, and that's really all you got to say about David Tennant. The one downside here is that I think that they could bring Kilgrave back, and if that's the case, then I would absolutely want David Tennant to continue playing that role. But I also would have really liked to see him play Reed Richards. That's a complete side note here. I think he would have been a fantastic Reed Richards as well.
Possibly.
But he was frightening as Kilgrave. So for me, he's easily an A-tier villain.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I want to put him A-tier. The only other thing I want to say about him, specifically about David Tennant, when we went to South by Southwest in 2019, and the entire time we were there, it was like endless, nonstop promotion by Amazon for that show, Good Omens.
Yeah.
And just David Tennant was all over that show. And the fact that David Tennant was in it, I was like, I'm almost tempted to want to watch this show just because of David Tennant.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. A-tier. All right. Another person with a purple background. Zemo.
All the purple. Well, I mean, these guys make sense.
Yeah.
Were you going to give Purple Man another background?
You can't. What are you going to do? You're going to give the person that's called the Purple Man a fuchsia background? No.
Well, fuchsia's pretty close to purple, but
a red, yellow. You want me to give the Purple Man a yellow background? No.
Yeah. Zemo. I love that you went with the more closer to comic accurate image for Zemo here.
It was really the best image I could find.
First of all, I love this villain. This is actually one of my favorite villains in the MCU. And I'll dive into a little bit. Like we got a good look at him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We factor in his dance skills. I mean, you kind of have to.
I mean, I will accept his dance skills on the same level that I accept Ed Harris's dance skills in Creep Show and Crispin Glover's dance skills in Friday the 13th 4.
Well, you heard it here first. Yeah, so liked him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but let's talk about him in Civil War. I feel like whenever people talk about Civil War, they really frame that as it's Iron Man versus Captain America, and Iron Man is the villain in the movie. No, incorrect. Iron Man is a pawn in the movie, just like Captain America is a pawn in his own movie. They are pawns of this guy. No, not Whiplash. Zemo. They are pawns of Zemo. And the aside from the fact that like his whole plan is incredibly convoluted, and in reality there's absolutely no way all the pieces could fall in line exactly as they needed to be, leave that aside. It's a fictional universe, it's superheroes, comic book, whatever, it's fine. The mastermindedness of Zemo in Civil War, I think, is a great translation from Zemo in the comic books to the movie. And not only that, they gave his villainy a real depth, because I wouldn't even necessarily 100% call him a villain. This is like what I was saying about Ghost earlier. He's more of a sympathetic antagonist. His line of reasoning for why he was doing what he was doing, out of what happened to his family in Sokovia, and just everything that he saw. The downside where I separate him from Ghost is that he kind of takes it a little too far. And by little, I mean way too far.
He actually wants to destroy them. Ghost is just wanting a cure.
Ghost just wants to get better. He wants to actually like cripple the Avengers as a whole, and comes up with the whole plan to do it from the inside out. I think Zemo is easily an S tier villain for me. Just based on his motivation, based on his characterization, and based on Daniel Bruhl's performance as the character.
Bruhl.
Yeah, you never would have thought. He's like he just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Between his Zemo and his character in Inglourious Bastards, I love Daniel Bruhl.
Yeah, he's great.
I don't know if I was necessarily wanting to put him S tier. The only reason I would hesitate from S tier is if we're looking at just Civil War, his plan, in all honesty, is a little too coincidental.
Yeah, I was leaving that aside. It's a comic book.
It is a comic book. I know.
It's fictional.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as Joker. Okay, Joker in the Dark Knight, right?
Joker
his
in the
plan
Dark
is
Knight,
incredibly convoluted, but you know what? He's S tier villain.
All right. Good argument there. Very good argument.
You leave the fictional, I don't know if I can believe this, aside, because regardless of whether you can believe it or not, it happened. In the confines of the story of the movie, it happened.
That was quite possibly the best argument defense you could have for that. It's not really that much different than Heath Ledger's Joker.
Zemo is let me look at this real quick. Let me look at this whole entire list. Zemo is one of two. Yeah, I would argue two villains on this list who won. Literally only two villains on this list actually won, and Zemo is one of them. Yeah, he was still locked up, sure. But he succeeded in what he was doing in the immediate. It got rectified later on, obviously, by the time Infinity War rolled around. But in the immediate, he tore apart the Avengers. He did exactly what he was intending to do. So,
interesting. Yeah. So I'm looking ahead to who else we have left. I'm going to give like a slight, like maybe this hooks people in to continue watching. I think out of who we have left, I only have three other people I want to stick potentially S tier.
Ooh, let me see. Who are you talking about?
I think we're actually about halfway through so far. So we got what, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, we're almost halfway through with this.
I mean,
I think there's three more that I would consider S tier. Obviously we know who one of them is.
I've got four more that I consider S tier.
There's one that's S tier without a doubt. No question, it's S tier. Absolutely. End of the day. Yeah.
I got four more that I consider S tier myself, but
I wonder who that fourth one is. Interesting. Okay. Because I'm expecting the three that I have are probably also going to be the same for you, but
I think those three exist in my four, yes.
Well, before we talk about the S tier ones, let's talk about one who's definitely not S tier. Caecilius.
Oh, hey, gosh.
You're not S tier, my dude. This is another one of those. Unfortunately, I was not familiar with the character from the comics at all. So the only thing I have to go off of is this character in Doctor Strange.
And that actually is probably to your benefit.
Probably. I think Mads. First of all, I love Mads Mikkelsen as a villain. This was not the villain. If you were to tell me Mads Mikkelsen is going to play a villain for Marvel Comics and let me choose out of the entire list of villains of Marvel who I would want Mads Mikkelsen to play,
Let's say it together.
It's not Caecilius.
It's Doom.
It's Doctor Doom. Easily,
Exactly.
hands down, without a doubt. Like, he should have been Doctor Doom. God, I hate the fact that we probably missed out on that. But also, at the same token, again, we're talking about movies that involve real people, not drawings. I don't necessarily know if Mads Mikkelsen is the type of person who would want to be an S-tier level villain that is wearing a metal mask the whole time, so we don't get to see his face. Hollywood is very ego-driven in some cases.
They can always work around that some way somehow.
It's why like the was it the first Tim Story Fantastic Four movie? Why most of that movie we get to see Doom without a mask on until the very end, because that was also during the height of popularity of the TV show Nip Tuck.
Yeah,
that had
Julian McMahon.
Julian McMahon.
Yep.
In that, and Julian McMahon was like the primary face of that show between the two doctors.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm admitting the fact that I absolutely loved Nip Tuck, as deranged as that show was.
Yeah,
I loved that show.
Mads Mikkelsen as Caecilius.
Mads Mikkelsen as Caecilius. Yeah, I mean, I like him as a villain, but
this is where you find the balance of excellent actor who excellently did what he was given to do in that role. The Mr. Doctor, who am I to judge? That whole line is the one you always go back to for Doctor Strange as just a great line for this villain.
But it's also weird because he doesn't act like that for the entirety of the rest of the movie. It is really just that one little bit of dialogue that it's out of character. It's really weird.
Yeah, but it was fun.
It was fun. I liked it, but it was just really strange.
This role, who am I to judge? This role is very thin. This was a very thin villain. His whole purpose was just to get Dormammu to Earth, basically, to our dimension.
And then even that Dormammu is easily defeated.
Yeah. So if the argument was that he was going to he starts out as Caecilius, and then at the end of the movie, Dormammu comes into our dimension, and Caecilius is the physical embodiment of Dormammu, becomes the vessel for him, then yeah, absolutely. We've got a great villain here because it's both Caecilius and Dormammu at that point. Yeah. And it's Mads Mikkelsen playing both those roles. Peak. And good stuff.
I could see Mads Mikkelsen as Dormammu also. That would be a good casting choice for that character.
With the right writing, that's an A-tier villain right there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not exactly what we got out of Caecilius. I think they went with kind of a more thin villain just because we wanted to explore more of Doctor Strange himself and his personality and him being kind of his own villain in a way too, as well as what his power set brought to the universe of the MCU. Yeah. And for that, I understand. I think that's fine. But as a villain by himself, no. Where is he on my list? Oh, yeah. He's a D tier for me. Not quite F. Not quite F because he's still got a good performance out of Mads Mikkelsen. It's, we're not talking about, someone who's just, I mean, I could see the argument for F, honestly, but I put him in D.
But I would put him at the top of D. If we're actually going to care about where they're at within their tiers, I'm going to put him at the top of D.
Yeah, I do enjoy his performance as Caecilius a little bit more than I enjoyed Whiplash
or
Iron Jacket or
Yellow Jacket.
Yellow Jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like I'm like talking too much and I'm just trying to perform on camera. I have a feeling like my ego is just way too involved in this.
I wish you would have told me you were going to do that. I would have taken a bathroom break right when you were saying that.
I'm going to start off with the fact that when I heard that it was Kurt Russell is the villain, I'm like, okay, who's he playing? And then we found out it's Ego. This is another one of those that if you didn't know the comics, then you probably had a good time with this. But those of us that knew the comics and knew who Ego was were like,
what?
That's a planet? That's not a person. You don't need to hire an actor for this. You just CGI a planet with a face on it. That's Ego. Why are we hiring Kurt Russell?
Also, like, what is Ego in the comics? Is he really that threatening of an individualized villain?
Like Ego is on the same level as like the Celestials and Galactus and Eternity and the Living Tribunal. It's just one of those like mythical,
cosmic entities.
Cosmic entity, yeah. But I like the fact that there's two things I really like about that. I do like the fact that they personified him and then made it Kurt Russell. If they personified him and hired anyone else, I don't think it was going to work out as well. And the main, like, other than Kurt Russell being just a damn good actor, the other reason is because there are the couple of shots in the movie where they show the planet Ego that has the Ego face on it, and it's Kurt Russell's face. And at that point I was like, Kurt Russell does look like Ego. This was great casting. Phenomenal. The second thing that I really like about him, I forgot.
Nice.
I'm doing great here. I really like that they personified him and they got Kurt Russell to do it. I think that worked out very well. And I was able to watch that movie and be like, okay, I understand. I agree with this. I'm going to go with the flow of this. As far as like a villain, I mean, again, he's really like a villain that's really only threatening to the Guardians. I know he's trying to do his like expanse.
He's threatening to the whole dang universe.
That's what I'm saying. He's trying to do his expanse and like duplicate himself across the entire universe or whatnot, but he's for the most part, he's really only a threat to the Guardians who realize who he is. And especially the characterization of the fact that he was the one that was hiring Yondu to find all of his kids, and then he was just killing them off when they didn't have the celestial gene. That's pretty evil. And then on top of that, trying to coerce Peter Quill. I think they did a good job with him. Yeah. He's not S tier. I would put him probably no lower than a B.
So the beauty of his villainy is, and I'm not as big a fan of the second Guardians as I am the first and the third. But
all right, Sean Chandler.
A lot of people have that opinion. The beauty of his villainy is that you don't realize. I mean, obviously, if you're going into the movie, you're kind of going in knowing, okay, I think this guy's going to be the bad guy. This guy's got to be the bad guy, right? Just because I've seen movies before, this guy's got to be the bad guy. That's how this works.
In the comics, Ego is more on the villainous side, so yeah.
He's ego. He's more self-centered. He's self-interested. That is who he is as a character. Ego, the living planet's only interested in sustaining himself, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they did with this character. What I like about him is that you don't see his villainy until about halfway through the movie when he turns around and tells Peter, "Oh yeah, I put the cancer in your mom. I'm the one that put the tumor right in her."
And you saw Peter Quill go with his eyes like all blacked out, and he's like, "What?"
I wish I could do like the move
The
my
zoom
camera
in.
to do it, but it's, you zoom in while panning the camera back.
Yeah. Like they did to Brody and Jaws.
Yes.
That zoom in, pan out type of thing.
Yep. Yeah. You have his villainy kind of discovered when, oh yeah, I'm the one who put the cancer in your mom. And you're like, oh, screw this guy. And that's when you're all of a sudden like, you're turned against him, which is something amazing to be able to do, because up until that point, Kurt Russell has been Kurt Russelling all over the place. And if you don't know what that means, I mean, Kurt Russell has more charisma than almost any other human on this planet. So I think by putting himself in that position, or by them putting Kurt Russell in that position, we are completely sold on Ego as fun guy. And then they hit you with, oh yeah, no, I'm just doing this for my own self-interest. And it is good. It's good. I think Ego, again, is one of those villains where he's close to home for the main character, close to the heart, obviously being Peter's papa. But at the same time, like, he is intimidating. He is a villain to the entire universe because his expanse that he's trying to do does threaten the entire universe. And the Guardians at this point are the only ones who can stop him. But at the same time, he's one of those characters that I think, along with Ultron, kind of still always hangs out in the background in the universe somewhere. Ego doesn't necessarily get killed. He's just shoved off. Like, okay, we're done with you for a while. But he's still out there. And I think that's that might be the one downside, is that he is supposed to be a Celestial, but he's killable. They made him killable in the movie. And for that, I would probably put him at the B tier. He's a good villain, but I think that I've got people who are an A and S tier who are just the notch above.
Yeah.
But for Peter Quill, for the Guardians, he was actually a pretty good villain. He was definitely better than Ronan, for sure.
Let's say, if you don't understand the Kurt Russell of it, you need a good lesson taught by John Carpenter. The Thing, Escape from New York, and Big Trouble in Little China. How to get to know Kurt Russell in 3 movies.
Exactly.
All directed by John Carpenter.
Kurt Russell is like the most charismatic person ever.
Yeah.
Go watch his character in the Fast and Furious movies. Mr. Nobody.
Mr. Nobody. Yeah.
Golly.
Let's talk about Vulture.
Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton playing a Birdman. Like, this was a stretch.
He's here somehow. I don't know how. Probably has something to do with Spider-Man. Anyway,
him in the Oscars during that Batman bit, that was so good. I don't know if you, like, this is a completely aside. I don't know if you saw like any of the behind the scenes. He had to rehearse for that.
Yeah, he had to make sure he had a straight face.
No, he actually, like, that was a bit that was rehearsed with Schwarzenegger, DeVito, and Keaton in the Oscars.
I'm sure.
So
he had to make sure he could maintain the straight face.
The thing that gives it away, did you notice that he was wearing an ascot?
Yeah, he was wearing a Bruce Wayne outfit, not his tux. Yeah.
He was on I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. He was on there talking about how he wore an ascot to Bruce Wayne it up to look more like Bruce Wayne, and then doing the come on, take me on type of thing. It was great. Make Michael Keaton old Bruce Wayne and make a Batman Beyond movie, please. Thank you. Anyways, as far as him as the Vulture, great casting.
The brilliant thing there is that we ran straight over my Morbius reference, which is okay. That's perfectly fine to do.
Oh yeah, no one cares about Morbius.
Yeah. So keeping to him just strictly in Spider-Man: Homecoming, because that's the only movie he appeared in. He excellent villain. Excellent villain. I will say let's actually get a negative out of the way first. Does not look like a 1-to-1 from comic books, but the Vulture is kind of that's one of those characters I think is a little bit harder to adapt 1-to-1 because that's an older guy in a green spandex suit with wings. And somehow he's, able to fly. And yeah. So yeah, give him a tech suit, give him technology. And that's cool. But also, this is one of those villains that has an incredible motivation behind what he's doing. It's one of those, I'm doing this for my family. I'm fighting for my family, trying to give my family a better life. I'm tired of being ran over by the superhero world, being forced out of jobs and everything. And all that. So he had great motivation. Now let's add on top of that the one scene.
Yes.
That one scene in the car.
Scene. Yep.
Really, first of all, when Peter goes knocking on Liz's door and he answers the door, jaw dropped on the floor like, oh, shoot. Liz's dad is the bad guy in the movie.
Which is not the comics. So those of you who are familiar with the comic book characters, that was a twist and a surprise even for them, which kudos for Marvel to pull that off and make it work.
Yeah. First of all, that was fantastic. That is what started us off on. Oh no. The bad guy this whole time is just a family man. He's just a family man trying to provide for his family. That's it. His whole motivation is just to make sure that he can take care of his family.
Yeah. Which every single person understands and reasons with, and
he is probably the most relatable villain on this entire list.
Yeah.
And because of that, and that scene in the car,
that
scene
car scene, I'll be honest, I go back and watch that car scene almost about as much as I go back and I watch Tom Holland's performance on Lip Sync Battle. That is the one scene of that entire movie that I love rewatching. Every time I see it recommended to me on YouTube, I'm like, I do want to watch that scene again. The tension, the dialogue is so good.
I'm scared. I am scared of him in that scene.
Yeah.
And I'm not Peter. I'm not being threatened. But I am terrified of him in that scene because that is the one time where like I look at a villain, I'm like, this guy could actually kill Spider-Man. And he might just. He's going to let him go tonight, which is crazy, but he might just turn around and kill him.
And then when Spider-Man shows up later, he's like, hey, Peter, what's happening? Like,
yeah.
It's so good.
And it's because Michael Keaton.
Originally, it was rumored that the Vulture was going to be the villain in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. And I'm like, what a terrible character. I like the fact that at least in the Spider-Man, the animated series from the 90s, they did the Vulture in that, but they gave him that power where he could like absorb people's life force and make himself younger.
Yeah.
Which I liked. I thought that played well to a younger audience. It helped us really connect more with the villain. But I like Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton's not like this old, decrepit old guy like Adrian Toomes is in the comics before he had that power where he would make himself younger. I like the fact that they did that with Michael Keaton, and it worked so well.
Yeah. He is one of my S tiers.
Okay, so this is your fourth. All right. Yeah, I was going to put him A.
That car, the scene in the car, and then just the surprise and the Michael Keaton of it all. He is easily one of the MCU's best villains, which nobody really would have seen coming. Like if you tell me like Loki is one of the best villains, or spoiler alert, we're going to get to Thanos. Thanos is one of the best villains in the MCU. I would believe you. Those two make sense. But if you turn around and told me Vulture of all the characters, of all the villains in the MCU, Vulture is one of the best in the MCU, I wouldn't have believed you. They pulled it off. They made him intimidating, relatable. He's just so good.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to introduce the next one, briefly talk about it, and then I need to excuse myself to the bathroom real quick. I'll let Chris give his opinion.
Oh, it's a long one
but our
tonight.
next one is going to be Hela. Cate Blanchett is a hella good villain.
Go pee.
I do like the fact that we got Hela in, and this is another one of those where we're kind of combining some villains. They're combining Hela with the Enchantress, because the Enchantress is really the one that's trying to do everything that Hela's doing in this movie, including hiring the executioner.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that we kind of combined those characters, but I think Cate Blanchett did a really good job, because this is not a role that I would have actually ever seen, like, imagine Cate Blanchett being part of. A comic book super villainous? That's a little weird. But Cate Blanchett, I feel like, pulls it off. I like what she did with it. Even though it is very one note, it is just the pure and simple, I want to rule over everything. It's very generic. She's no different than the Shredder or Skeletor from the 80s. But she has fun with it, and I think that translates well for us. I would want to put her as an A-tier villain. So...
Yep. Thanks for not saying too much and leaving me with anything to speak about while you're excusing yourself.
Anyways, I'll be right back.
Right. So Cate Blanchett, where do I have her at? Where do I have her at? Hold on. Okay. I do. Okay. So Hela is one of those characters. It's like, okay, they're kind of introducing Thor's sister, out of nowhere here. And, I think that was fine, but like the direction I kind of went with her story, I thought was a little interesting. Her relation to the entire story of Thor Ragnarok is kind of interesting. There's part of me that feels like she maybe was like a little underused a little bit, in that she was just kind of hanging back on Asgard trying to take over and rule, while Thor and Loki and Hulk and everyone was kind of off doing their own thing. And it's one of those characters where I feel like they probably could have given more for her to do. Or if, the character were to come back. Side note to all this, Hela is a fantastic character in season 2 of What If. If y'all haven't checked out the What If series on Disney Plus, Hela has a solid episode, I think, in season 2. So a lot of good characterization there. But the Cate Blanchett of it all. Cate Blanchett, first of all, yeah, definitely having a ton of fun in this role. I love her in this role. I think she was a fantastic choice, and she's doing the most. She's doing the most. But this is, again, a character that I think they probably could have kept around a little bit longer. In fact, yeah, that whole episode is one of the favorites. Yeah, it was really good. I don't remember seeing a body for Hela. I know she was like kind of hanging around while Surtur was destroying Asgard.
Yeah.
And so we would have to infer and assume that she lost her life there. But also, isn't she she's kind of like one of those that we consider immortal in a way. I guess Valhalla exists, but I don't know. I feel like she's one of those characters that could have stuck around, and I feel like they kind of tried to essentially off her, and she's one of those I think villain-wise they probably should have held on to. And because of that, I find it a little bit harder to fully get behind her 100%. And that I think that they should have done more with her. But I guess the performance as a whole was actually really good. I put her as a B, but I could be argued could be argued higher to like an A tier, maybe not S tier, but definitely probably up to A tier if wanted to do that.
I would say let's put her in A again. This is going to be one I think we're going to have a lot more fun like after we're done with all these, trying to see if there's anyone we want to move around.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping my eye on Red Skull there.
Well, you want to bump Red Skull up, right?
I do want to bump Red Skull up.
We'll see.
All right. So this one should be... I thought I moved all these. Good Lord. All right. So next one. Killmonger.
S tier.
Yep, I agree. All right. Well, thank y'all for watching. This is going to go S tier. We can quickly move on. Dude, Killmonger, the motivations of Killmonger was so good. This was, I feel like, the test run for Thanos, in that we're trying to create a villain who has good intentions, but personally, they don't, within their life and their experiences, they haven't been able to find a way to do what it is that they feel like they need to do, other than just taking it by force. His intentions were good. His intentions are noble. His intentions are exactly what they ended up doing after he was defeated.
They just didn't do so with force and with destruction and chaos, which he would have caused.
It was... Killmonger was like, hey, we should be sharing this with the world. Why aren't we? And then they defeat Killmonger, and then everyone in Wakanda's like, you know what? He was right. Like, it's so weird.
Let's do what he wanted to do, but let's not do it with violence.
Let's kill him first, and then we'll do what he wanted to do, instead of like, you know what? You make a good point. We're going to go ahead and do that. Feel free to continue living and not kill anyone.
Like, you know a villain is good when
heroes end up doing what he wanted.
Well, yeah. You know a villain is good when they bring him back in some capacity.
Yeah.
And I know I'm shooting myself in the foot with Red Skull here, but they did bring the fact that they brought him back for the second one in the capacity that they did, albeit small, but still brought him back, is because they know and recognize that Killmonger had an incredible what's the word? Impact. He had an incredible impact on just kind of like, not really just the Black Panther storyline, but I would say the MCU as a whole, because he is essentially the catalyst that pushed Wakanda into the light, effectively, having T'Challa essentially make the decision to come out of hiding. So his line of reasoning, the understanding of, I grew up over there, I saw what they go through over there, I saw what our people go through in these situations, and what has happened here and there, and we could be helping people, we could be serving people, we could be doing so much. And this is one of those situations where it's like, yeah, he was basically the bad guy version of the good guy. That is effectively what the final fight boiled down to, but it was the lines after the fight. It was when T'Challa brought him up to see the sunrise or the sunset, whatever one.
Mm-hmm.
And the lines that they shared right there at the end, when he kind of fell on his own sword a little bit, when he just, you know what, I'm out. It was those lines that I think solidify Killmonger as an S tier villain. Because you have, again, this is a situation where you have a hard time even saying the word villain in this case. Yeah, the way he's going about it is not couth at all, but
it's uncouth.
It's very uncouth, but he isn't entirely incorrect. So, good villain, S tier.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we are, there we go. Since we're playing around in the S tier, let's go ahead and add another one. Thanos.
S tier.
When we did this, when we first announced this video, when the two of us decided that this is what we want to tier rank, the first thing that came to mind, Thanos, is S tier. Do I really need to explain why? Do we all understand? Do we need to spend time on this, or would we like us to just move on to the other characters we have to talk about?
He's the other villain on this list, other than Zemo, who won.
Yeah.
Infinity, when your villain is essentially the protagonist of their own movie, which is what a lot of people argue for Infinity War. Infinity War was Thanos' movie, and the Avengers were the antagonists to him.
In fact,
when your villain is essentially the hero of their own movie, that's an S tier villain. The fact that they built up to him, they took their time and they built up to him. They did a couple little scenes here and there. He had his brief moment in Guardians of the Galaxy. He had the fine, I'll do it myself at the end of Age of Ultron.
He had that little smirk at the end of
the smirk at the end of the first Avengers.
Yeah. Played by Damien Poitier.
Yes. Who appeared in Captain America Civil War.
Oh yeah. I keep forgetting he was in that too. Every time I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, there's Thanos.
He easily is at the top of the list. He is him.
And if anyone else is possibly questioning why Thanos would be S tier, here's what I would pose as a question to the general public.
Have you watched the MCU?
Did you know who Thanos was before the MCU? Or specifically, did you know who Thanos was before Infinity War? Sure, maybe you saw his like little smirk at the end of the first Avengers and you were one of the few people in the crowd going, who's that guy? And hopefully your date or whoever was with you at that time was like, oh yeah, that's Thanos, the Mad Titan. Like,
he's in love with death.
You were around some kind of a comic book nerd like me who could explain that. But otherwise, I love the fact that Thanos is now commonly mentioned just like the Joker, just like Green Goblin or Lex Luthor or whatever. Like, if you were to like name a comic book villain, people nowadays are quick to mention Thanos.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I will say he's also another argument that I would point to whenever someone questions whether Kevin Feige is making good decisions or not. I would point to his decision making over Thanos as the translation from comic book to screen. Definitely different, but I would argue perfect for what needed to be done on screen, because in the comic books, he's got this whole storyline where he's in love with the personification of death. Didn't see an ounce of that in the movies, except for that funny little line at the end of the first Avengers. To challenge them is to court death, and then he smiles, and that's it. That's the extent of anything close to that we've gotten from comic book to movie.
Yeah,
and I think that's all you really needed, because the motivation, the line of reasoning, and everything that they gave to Thanos in these movies is exactly what they needed to do for him. I mean, the fact that he came in and was like, I'm the only one who has the will to be able to do what needs to be done. And then the reason for doing that is he's trying to save life in the universe. It's just, they gave him great motivation. They gave him great reasoning. They made him intimidating. He was threatening.
I like even more so, like, in Infinity War, they humanized him by saying, like, look, I'm actually trying to save life. There's not enough resources to sustain the life that we have or the life we're about to have. We need to decrease the amount of living beings we have. Therefore, the resources can stretch out and we can all survive. I love that that was the motivation going into Infinity War. By the end of Endgame, he's all like, yeah, I realize that y'all all are never going to give up hope as long as you realize what has been. I'm just going to kill all of y'all. Like,
You're never going to see my perspective. You're never going to see it from my point of view. So therefore, get out of the way.
Which is amazing for that to logically be the go-to. Because, I mean, not that I want to be a supervillain. That logic checks out. And that's scary. So, yeah, I love the fact that they did that to him. They went from humanizing him to making that character that you can sympathize with to, you know what, I'm just going to destroy all of you and start all over again. I am a god. That's wild. Anyways, that's enough about Thanos. Let's talk about...
I like that you stopped by tucking him neatly behind Loki. I would position him over Loki.
You want to position him over Loki?
Absolutely.
I still think Loki... I would still put Loki higher in the fact that Loki still has some humanization behind him.
No, Thanos is over Loki. Thanos hired Loki.
Okay.
Thanos put Loki to work.
But
Thanos killed Loki.
I will make this statement now, and I'm pretty sure, Chris, you're going to agree with me. No matter what happens, Thanos and Loki are not moving from these two positions.
That is correct.
That is the top.
They are 1 and 2.
I don't think out of all the Marquees we've ever done, I don't feel as emotionally correct as I do about these two characters.
I love Nerd's comment here. I don't know how you have that many S's for the MCU though. Up until more recent years, I would totally agree with that statement. But my argument is look at the ones we have in the S tier. That's my argument.
I still have one more that I want to put S tier.
So do I. And at this point, we might be on the same one.
Is it knows? So? Here's the thing: is it a character? Is it a character that we both really love? In so much that I also have a hot toy figure of him.
Okay, we're not talking about the same character then. You definitely don't have a hot toy, the one I put in the S tier.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's take a break from the ones that we do want to put S tier, and let's talk about one that is not going to be S tier at all whatsoever. Yonrog.
Nerd, the one next to Kingpin is Zemo.
Yeah. So Yonrog. Nope. Here's how low this character is. It was hard trying to find this image for this. It was hard trying to find a good image of him for the image that I created for this square that he's in. It was hard to find a good image of Yonrog for this. This was the best I could do. And it looks good. I think it looks good on the stream, it's but fine. Just know behind the scenes, yeah, this is not a good looking image in general. There's a reason why. And Nerd's hitting it right on the head. Yonrog sucks. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of like any of the Kree villains other than like the Supreme Intelligence, which luckily we got to see in the Marvels. And I was super excited that they showed us the actual Supreme Intelligence. After Captain Marvel, I thought that they would never touch on the actual comic book accurate version of Supreme Intelligence.
Do wish that it wasn't just a quick throwaway scene.
Sure, but the fact that we even got to see it, I'm excited for.
Sure. Yeah. Who's Yonrog?
Exactly.
No, I mean, like, does he exist in the comic books?
Yes.
Okay. Jude Law, he did well with, you know, what this role was. But this is a very thin role. I will. The only reason. Okay. I'm going to spoil myself here. D tier for me, not F tier, but D tier for me. And the reason why I say D tier is because at the very least, there's connective tissue between him and Carol. in the relationship that they had with each other in terms of fighting alongside each other and blah 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 blah, all that. I could hear arguments for F, but that's about the extent that I give for why he's in D tier. He's definitely not higher than that.
I would be tempted to want to put him in F only because he's really, out of all the characters in Captain Marvel, he's really the only character who actually understands and knows who she really is, and he is continuing to perpetuate, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Perpetuate,
yeah. The story that she is actually Kree, and he is trying to hide from her who she really is. He is gaslighting her the entire time. Yeah. Not only within the confines of that movie, but he's been gaslighting her well before this movie. Also, the one thing that I really do like about him is that final fight between him and Carol, where they're in the middle of nowhere, that desert, whatever, and he's got the gun drawn on her. She's sitting there with her like full powers, and all of a sudden he turns around and goes, "That's what I like about you. You've learned very well." He puts his gun away and he's trying to be like friendly to Carol, and she's like, "I'm not falling for your shit." Screw you, dude.
Boom.
And then she hits him like clear across the left. It's so great. But I like the fact that as far as the character of Jon Rog, the military strategist that he is within the Kree Empire, that was where his mind went, is like, let me connect with you back on a personal level, like we saw at the beginning of the movie. Let me connect with you that way and see if this works. And it didn't. And it's so funny. But I like the fact that that's what they did with that character. That's the only like real positive I had to say. Other than that, this character is a throwaway, no nothing, I don't care. And I would put him in F.
He exists strictly for the necessity to have an antagonist that Carol can hit.
Yeah.
Because she couldn't hit the Supreme Intelligence. You're not going to see her punch Annette Bening.
No.
But you will see her hit Jude Law.
Yes.
So I'm okay with F tier, mostly because I actually only have 2 F tiers on my list. And I'm okay with filling it out a little bit more.
Let me guess. Malekith and Dar-Benn. I know we're not to Dar-Benn yet, but I mean, we've been making that joke this entire time. So
I would put Jon Rog at the top of the F tier, though.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put Malekith under him. Malekith is the most know-nothing character other than Dar-Benn, and this is going to be a fun conversation we have when we get to her.
I would make
I
would make room for Dar-Benn between the two of them.
In fact, you know what? I am going to go ahead and do that because I think I can understand the reasoning on that already. Spoiler alert, Dar-Benn is going to go F tier, but there's a reason why she's not. Yeah. That's funny. Never done this on a Marquee before, but I mean, come on.
We're just spoiling it.
We're not going to fool ourselves here. Dar-Benn is, God, just what a terrible character. How
much further do we have?
So here is the one that I was also thinking was going to be that you and I would agree would be S tier. That I have the Hot Toys figure of. And that is Mysterio.
Oh, yeah. I know why you would think that.
The characterization. So, granted, as a comic book lover, Quentin Beck, my love of Quentin Beck and Mysterio from back, like, knowing of the comics and this character before the movie and whatnot. Quentin Beck is a movie special effects artist, and I love that. For a while there, like I believe like our parents were always pushing for me to like learn how to work in special effects and stuff.
That would have been a good career.
Yeah, that would have been a great career, but I never thought that like the character of Mysterio was always a little too weird in my mind to be something that could translate well on the big screen and live action. And then they did it. And
boy, did they do it.
Man, they did a great job with that character. Like, even though he's not a movie special effects, the fact that he is a disgruntled scientist who worked for Tony Stark, who created Barf. I love that that's the angle that they went with. And again, it worked so well. The fact that we're changing up how the character is from the comic books and it still fits within the realm of reality in the movies. I love that. And then on top of that, the fact that we got specifically that one scene, and they do play it again like later in the movie, but that one scene where he traps Spider-Man in all of these illusions. Oh, it was so good. Like, if you are a fan of this character from the comics, you are super happy just of that one. That one scene made the entire movie. And I'll be honest, I was not a fan of the fact that Spider-Man was being Spider-Man over in Europe. I still felt like we needed to focus more on him staying in New York and developing his relationship with all the other villains, because Spider-Man has a great rogues gallery. I wanted to see more of that. But the fact that we went over to Europe and then added Mysterio, and they nailed Mysterio. This is one of my S tiers.
Mysterio is probably my favorite Spider-Man villain for many of the reasons that you listed, and it's one of the reasons why he was my most eagerly desired villain to see on a big screen. Because how do you adapt a movie special effects artist to a big screen?
In a movie.
You do it with pizzazz. Because you're literally letting your CGI artists, your special effects artists, go hog wild because they are animating and doing CGI effects for someone who is of their own ilk, basically. Now, granted, that's obviously not the direction they went with the character. Like you said, he's not a special effects artist in the movie. Side note, I believe that Quentin Beck still is alive. I don't believe he's dead, and I believe that he could have tucked away somewhere and actually gotten a career in the movie special effects. The MCU, Marvel has a tendency to do this kind of thing with these movies where we're introduced to characters sometimes that aren't quite exactly as we know them from the comics, but they do eventually move into that. Namely, let's go back to Abomination. Didn't quite look like Abomination from the comics, but when we saw him again in She-Hulk, looked 1-to-1 as the comic books. So, Zemo's another good one. We're introduced to him. He's just a regular guy, but when we see him again in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he's got his mask. He looks like Zemo from the comic books. So, I argue that Quentin Beck will definitely come back at some point, and he will be a movie special effects artist. That's the bet I make for the MCU. That being said, I love the character. I love what they did with him, and I love the. I absolutely love that special effects sequence that you were talking about. For me, though, as a whole, he does not, as a character matched up to these other villains in the S tier, does not line up with everybody else in the S tier. He is an A tier villain for me. And I'll tell you why, because I have one other character who goes in the S tier who is definitely, I think, still above Mysterio in terms of characterization and motivation and what he's doing. I think motivation-wise, character-wise, he is kind of thin in terms of being a Spider-Man bad guy because his whole motivation was Tony Stark, not Spider-Man. In the comic books, Mysterio is always more angled towards Spider-Man.
Because Spider-Man is what sabotaged his career as a special effects artist.
Yes. In the movie, being Spider-Man's villain, the fact that he's angled more towards Iron Man does take some notches off for me a little bit. Now, granted, I understand the confines of what the story needed to be and where it needed to go. It makes sense. But, and I think I argue if we get Mysterio again in the future and in some capacity, and he becomes that fully fledged like I was saying, the special effects artist, they could do more with him that I think could bump him up to S tier. But for now, for me, I think tier wise, he's on the A tier.
You want to put him at the top of A tier, even over Alexander Pierce?
Okay, so let's look at the terms of villainy here. Let's look at Kilgrave and look at what Pierce represents.
I'm also looking at it from the viewpoint of how they translated the character,
how they adapted
in the comics.
That's a hard one. For me, like I have a hard time putting him over Kilgrave and Pierce.
But you're okay with at least putting him over Hela?
Yeah.
All right.
I think I technically had Hela lower, but originally, but
all right. So next one. And other than the movies, I think everyone else is movie related. Yep.
Actually, pause.
Mm-hmm.
I can make an argument for putting Mysterio above Pierce, actually. I know we wanted to move on from this, but I'm still stuck on that. What did he do at the very end of Far From Home? He spoiled who Spider-Man was to everybody.
Right? Oh, yeah.
And that was the catalyst for the entirety of No Way Home. Wrecking Peter's life, villainy in terms of Peter's life, is huge. Granted, it's a lot more specific to one focused hero rather than Pierce, running Hydra and world domination type stuff.
But it's more of a threat within the confines of the movie and the character and the hero and whatnot.
But yeah, Spider-Man also is supposed to be a street level hero too. And so if we're looking at Spider-Man in a bubble, Mysterio is a big villain in terms of what he did for Spider-Man alone.
Yeah. All right. So again, as I was saying, the last time we're going to venture outside of the actual movies, but now we are easily within the MCU. This is our only villain that's coming from the MCU TV shows, and that would be Agatha Harkness.
I'm going to give my thoughts on this, and then I'm going to excuse myself for a minute.
Okay.
Was she a villain in the show?
Yes.
I mean, technically, yes. They had a big final fight.
Is she a villain in the comics? No.
I put her as a B for some reason. I think technically I would actually put her lower than a B because while she is a fun character, and I think that does give points in her direction, and I do think Catherine Hahn was fantastic in the role. Her only real amount of villainy was kind of teasing Scarlet Witch and having a big final fight with her at the end of the show. And maybe introducing the Darkhold to her. Maybe that's points. But outside of that, not a whole lot else going on. And so, yeah, you could argue those points. And I'm going to let you do that. So
but I'm gonna go with William Harold's point. She killed the dog, man. Come on.
Yeah. Terrible. Just awful. Just the worst. Just bad.
Yeah, so in the comic book, she's not necessarily a hero, but she is someone that helps train the Scarlet Witch to use her witchy powers. I like the fact that they made her a villain in WandaVision. I also love the fact that pretty much every comic book lover who knew Marvel knew from the get-go that Catherine Hahn was playing Agatha Harkness. What was she, Agnes? Like, come on. That was an obvious connection there. And then I want to give it to her just for that intro. When they first introduced her as Agatha Harkness and they played that Agatha All Along song, like, you name me another supervillain that has their own theme song. There isn't one. Agatha Harkness has her own theme song. Yeah, we knew it was Agatha all along. Either that or Mysterio, who knows? But Yeah, I liked her. I like the fact that she was Agatha Harkness, Catherine Hahn playing her. You bought that song from Apple. That's great. It was really good. Like I love what they did with that character. Yes, it's not the same Agatha Harkness from the comics. In the comic books, Agatha Harkness is a much older woman, much like Madam Web. So they are youngifying these characters to make them relatable in the movies. But I still like the performance that Catherine Hahn had as that character, specifically when we're going back and seeing the flashbacks to where she has been the one controlling all along. I think they did great with that.
So here's my point of contention with that is I watched through WandaVision. I think I've watched through it maybe twice as a whole. What was she doing all along? Because Wanda was in charge of the entirety of capturing Westview. Like that was actually Wanda. It was Wanda all along.
Agatha was helping to perpetuate, like, for example, when what's her face from Marvel's?
Oh, Teyonah Parris' character?
Yes. When she came to visit and then she got sucked out of the house and thrown, we were thinking that was probably Wanda was pushing her way. I kind of believe that Agatha may have had a hand in that, in manipulating the scenario and making sure that Wanda stays exactly where she's at. Like everything that Agatha was doing in WandaVision was to keep Wanda where she's at mentally, just controlling the entire town, staying in this fantasy realm. So Agatha could continue to learn from the Darkhold how to control the Scarlet Witch. That's what I think she was essentially doing. She was trying to control Wanda from the get-go.
Yeah, I put her at a B tier, but I could hear C maybe.
I'm okay with B. Only because, this is another one of those that she was really only confined to the one thing that she was in. I'm eager to see what they do with her in the TV show Agatha All Along, or Agatha
Darkhold Diaries, or Agatha House
Diaries,
of
or Agatha Into the Darkhold, or Agatha getting some Taco Bell, or Agatha paying her bills, or whatever they want to call that show.
War for the Planet of the Witches.
War for the Planet of the Apes. Yeah. But like I would agree that she's probably B tier. But I'm also reserving out hope that she's probably going to end up becoming more of a hero in her own show.
Which is going to be the craziest switch, considering that she killed the dog.
Yeah, we're not supposed to remember that.
How do you bounce somebody back from killing an innocent animal?
Don't know. I do need to step away again, unfortunately. But I will let Chris take over for this one. Dracoff.
No.
If I could also give you
suck.
If I could also give you a behind the scenes, there is no good image of Dracoff. This is just an image of the actor. There's no actual Dracoff
image of Ray Winston.
It's just an image of Ray Winston.
It's just an image of Ray. Who's the bad guy? Who's the villain here? It's Ray Winston.
Yeah. But yeah, Dracoff. Have fun.
Oh God. F you for leaving me with this one. Of all the villains you could have left me with, you left me with Dracoff.
Sorry.
Here's the thing. I actually argued for Dracoff being on this list, to be specific. We were going through all of the different movies and all the different villains, and like what movie gets a villain on this list. Like I said at the top of the show, Eternals really can't pinpoint a specific main villain for that. That's why no Eternals villains appears on this particular list that we're doing tonight. But I did argue that Dreykov, in terms of villainy, in terms of what he means to Black Widow, the Black Widow program, what he did to essentially Taskmaster, and all of that stuff, I think nets him a spot on this list. Whether we want to rate him high or not, I don't really know. I myself, where do I have him on this list? Oh, I myself have put him at the B tier. I think his villainy is at the very least B tier, not any lower, just because what he is responsible for in terms of the whole Red Room, the whole Black Widow, just the absolute skin crawling nature of how he was controlling those women, I think nets him a solid spot on this list for sure at that B tier. It's the same for me. It's the same along the same lines as Kilgrave, maybe a little bit less so because I think Dreykov's maybe. I want to argue that there's a little bit more comic bookiness to him, just in the nature of the Black Widow program as a whole. But I think you got to put him on this list. I mean, we were talking about, do we put Taskmaster on the list? And I think Taskmaster's kind of also, ironically, falls in the same lines as like a character like Ghost or something, wherein, or maybe even more so like Winter Soldier, wherein she's not 100% in control of her actions. And so you don't necessarily have her on the list, but you do have the one, like we have Alexander Pierce on this list. You have the one who is in control of her actions. You do have the one who's in control of all of their actions on the list. And just the whole of who Dreykov is, he might be probably, aside from the very fictionalized, where is the Red Room kind of thing with Black Widow. It's, this weird station in the sky type thing. He is probably, along with Kingpin, I would say arguably one of the more realistic villains on the list. In terms of what makes him a villain, just absolute skeeviness. He's just an absolute awful person. He's just a terrible, terrible person in general. And I think that's why you have him here. And of course, I'm talking about Dreykov, not Ray Winstone. But anyway, I put him at the B tier.
You put him B?
Yeah. Yep. Go back and watch the movie.
I don't need to. Did you ever watch?
You trying to put him higher?
Did you ever watch that movie Elektra?
No.
You
I
didn't
actually never watched Elektra.
So I will put, when talking about Dreykov here, I will put him in the same realm as talking about Elektra. Elektra is a movie. They made the 2003 Daredevil with Ben Affleck, Jennifer Gardner, and Fox, 20th Century Fox, was like, hey, we get that people like this movie to a certain extent. People really seem to be liking Jennifer Gardner's Elektra character. There is the comic book possibility of Elektra gets killed by Bullseye and she comes back to life. Let's do that in the movies and bring Elektra back to life and then give her her own movie. That movie is, while I feel like ultimately the Elektra movie, it's okay. It's not horrible, but it is one of the most blandest. Like it's a comic book movie that has no salt and pepper in it. It is a very bland, flavorless movie. That is what Dreykov is to me. He is a bland, flavorless villain. He doesn't do anything besides sitting behind that desk and bragging about how much that no one can kill him because of the pheromones. Not realizing all you have to do is just pinch your nose. Apparently, for some reason, Natasha has to break her nose, but sure, okay, whatever. This is a boring, bland villain that is not threatening at all in the least. Even though they tried to get Ray Stevenson to play him.
Not Ray Stevenson, Ray Winston.
Winston? Yeah, Winston. Yeah, it's the fact they got him to. It's just a bland character, has no real motivation. Yeah, this is F. This is F tier. What's surprising is I still want to put Malekith under him. Like, I still think he's better than Malekith.
I would implore you to go back and watch Black Widow again.
I've watched Black Widow multiple times. He's still just a generic, bland villain.
The weight of who he is as a villain is what they're telling you that he has done. What you know that he has done, what he has been responsible for in regards to the Black Widow program, in regards to Taskmaster, in regards to the entire Red Room as a whole. He is an awful, awful human being who has done awful, awful, terrible things. He is not bland. He is a very unfortunately realistic look at real people who have done real terrible things, and what happens if you give that person the power and control that he had in the movie.
But the problem I feel like is most of that is off screen. We don't actually see him being villainous.
Really, you don't want to see that stuff on screen. The fact that it's the same as like Kilgrave, honestly. A lot of the stuff that Kilgrave is really bad for, you don't want to see that on screen. Because again, that's an NC-17.
But the difference is Kilgrave was still able, within the confines of that show, they were able to convey that Kilgrave could do that, and you believed it. And I don't believe Dreykov is capable of anything except sitting on his fat ass eating Cheetos all day.
That's a weird take. They very much convinced me and many others that he is very capable of doing what he did in that movie. So I would push against that very hard.
All right, you want to put him D?
No, I put him as B.
You put him as B?
Yes, I put him as B tier.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
I'll put him at the end of C, and that's my final offer.
I'm going to put him in C. I don't know about the end of C, but somewhere.
I'm going to put him right here. Because Ronan did way more than Dreykov did within the confines of the movie. I'm open to revisiting this one at the end. I will trade you a Dreykov for a Red Skull.
Hey, does chat have my back on this one? You guys have my back on this one. Yeah, I'm not crazy, right? Like he's a villain worth something. Black Widow's not my favorite MCU movie. It's not even close to the top. Yeah. But recognizing his villainy within the confines of that movie, he is leaps and bounds terrifying.
Yeah. All right, we will revisit. I'm open to revisiting it, but let's move on to the actual Mandarin, Wenwu.
That's a weird image too.
Yeah, some of these, like the images to find them, are just really hard to do.
That looks like an image that was like printed on like a 7-Eleven plastic cup or whatever.
This looks like the image that was used probably on the back of the action figure. This like is the cardboard backing.
This is the image of Wenwu you get if Shang-Chi had a partnership with Ocean Spray.
That's a good reference right there. I see your point, but Chris's points brings him to D from F of Robert's points. I mean, that's what I would actually be more happy with putting him. If I can't put him in F, I want to put him at the end of D. But Wenwu. Wenwu is one of those that, like, he's not necessarily evil. He's just kind of confused. And he's misguided, maybe influenced by the rings. Maybe. But, like, as we see in the movie, his heart's in the right place. He's just trying to rescue his wife. And he's behind that giant rock
in the confines
wall.
Of the story that I was saying, in the confines of the story that's being told in the movie.
Yeah. He's not necessarily evil. There is a part of him in like the prologue of that movie that is stating that he does want to just conquer everyone and rule everyone and whatnot. Fine. That actually is the real Mandarin, but at the end of the day, the actual plot of the story is he's just trying to find his wife that he believes is trapped behind this wall, and he's refusing to listen to anyone who tells him anything logical or anything that makes sense. Basically, he's an irate customer that I have to deal with in a customer service job.
Stop it.
Refusing to listen to any logic that I have to tell him, even though I'm 100% correct and he's just misguided. He's not necessarily bad, but I wanted more from the actual Mandarin. I don't know. I'd probably put him C.
That's
really low. Like I could entertain for higher up. Not
actually
here, but I could entertain B, maybe an A.
I actually
customer.
God damn it. Put him in the A tier. An A tier villain. God.
I just want to make sure that everyone who's watching this, who may potentially be a customer of mine, this doesn't mean you are free to be a dickhead customer and that we're still going to think of you as an A tier customer. No, not at all.
Anyway, so my perspective on this, my point of view on him as a character, Shang-Chi's dad. So we once again, like Ego to Star-Lord, we've got a familial connection here. On top of that, we've also got the fact that he is someone who has been going for, gosh, how long did they say he was around for? Like 1,000 years or something?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like 1,000 years. Okay, so he's been around for like 1,000 years or something, and the fact that he's been doing all these terrible things throughout all the he's been doing all these terrible things for so long, and then like he finally finds someone to kind of turn him to the good side. I'm being very oversimplified with how I explain this. And then he loses her, and then of course we have the setup of the entire movie, the creature behind the door kind of convincing him, and then him falling back into that like very stubborn perspective.
The darkness.
I think there, with the connection between him and his children in the movie, and I think that adds so much weight to the actual fight between him and Shang-Chi, and that there's just so much built into that. He's easily just an A tier character for me. I mean, just the motivation, the characterization, everything behind the depth of the character, everything there is an A tier character for me.
Like, I'll agree with that in so much that he's also probably the most human out of all the villains that we have on here so far.
His motivations are the most human.
Yeah. Like, I can understand his rationalizations if he was a person who had that access to those rings and that power in real life.
Well, he's the most human of the characters on this list that have superpowers.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that Vulture is probably the most human on this list.
Vulture and Kingpin. Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Moving on to... This one's going to be a little weird because I know that there's technically a bunch of villains in this movie, but we really need to focus exactly on who is the villain of the movie. And I think out of everyone in Spider-Man No Way Home, it really comes down to Green Goblin.
And this is just also an argument to put the Green Goblin on this list because he's been around since the first Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, essentially this is the Green Goblin from the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. So He's made his way to the MCU. Kudos.
He's intense. He is intimidating. He's threatening. He's terrifying.
And he's also somewhat of a scientist himself.
And that's just Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. He's something of a scientist himself.
He killed Aunt May.
Yeah.
He is responsible for Aunt May's death.
That's a no-no.
He is the arch enemy of Spider-Man, and he made himself the arch enemy of 3 Spider-Men in one movie. Granted, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between him and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, but still, the point is they were on a team together. And it's Willem Dafoe being Willem Dafoe, not Willem Defriend. And that, first of all, I think
it's a good pun.
I think when we're talking about his character in No Way Home, we also have to reference back to his character from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, and wrap that into this with it. He's a loose cannon. He's terrifying. He's capable of a whole lot and without remorse. I argue A tier. I argue A tier for him.
This is probably like my favorite moment of him from the entire movie, when Peter's just beating on him and he's like,
it's like the Joker.
Yeah. I mean, essentially Willem Dafoe would have been a great Joker as well. I haven't gotten to see that, but
he would have.
Yeah. Like that's that one little shot of him just recoiling after being hit with that goblin grin. Oh, it's so good. This is one I would actually want to probably put him S tier. The only reason I'm not wanting to fully commit to S tier is we don't get the full on goblin character.
It's still not the 1-to-1
that we do in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
And it's still not neither in the Sam Raimi nor in No Way Home is it a perfect, or what we would classify enough as a perfect adaptation from the comics. Like much to say like Loki or Thanos.
Closer.
Much to say like Loki or Thanos or Kingpin were. Like, yeah. But that being said, we also still have Vulture sitting in the S tier, so that's not 100% a thing that you push against someone either. So
you say you want to put him A tier?
He's A tier for me.
I do want to put him over others though in A tier. Like I definitely want to put him over Hela.
I would
put him over Hela and Wenwu.
The death of Aunt May of it all, I would probably almost put him neck to neck with Mysterio.
I can agree with that.
Because I think both of them affected Spider-Man's life in nearly equal capacity. Granted, Mysterio didn't kill Aunt May, but Mysterio was, again, the catalyst that led to everything that Peter knew and loved being kind of torn from him in his life. Now, that's partly also because of Peter's own actions, but that's not the point. Defoe is the only one who could deliver Norman's in sabbatical, honey, and it not be cheesy as heck. Yeah.
You got me feeling hella good. Anyways. Every time I see Hela, that's the first thing that pops in my mind.
Wow.
That Gwen Stefani song. All right.
Now, if we follow by those original rules, 2 tiers can have 6 in them. That we would have already had that now.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because there is still one other character that we're going to hit that I actually would put in the S tier.
All right. So at the beginning of this, I was talking about Loki and the fact that Loki is a villain. He becomes a hero. And I was saying that this topic is going to come back up later. Here's where it comes back up at. In the complete opposite, in that we get a hero that becomes a villain. Maybe. Scarlet Witch.
Well, okay, so hold on. So technically she's a villain that becomes a hero that goes back to being a villain.
Yeah. She bounces back and forth here. Like, I get, like, Age of Ultron, she's just misguided, and ultimately her and her brother Quicksilver realize that Ultron is evil, and they're like, no, we don't like Tony Stark, but we don't like what you're doing even more.
Yeah.
So we're going to go work with Tony Stark. And then we realized that we were kind of misguided in the fact that it wasn't Tony Stark that did that. It really was, like, I believe it was the 10 rings maybe that planted the Stark Industries missile in Sokovia. I don't know if they actually confirmed that. I might just be imagining that, but it wasn't Tony Stark that caused that missile to destroy Wanda and Pietro's family.
Right.
But yeah, any capacity, she becomes a villain in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And she is a brutal villain in that movie.
Yeah.
There's no reasoning with her. No matter how much sense Doctor Strange makes, the arguments, the points that he's making, she's still super evil. And that's mainly because of the Darkhold. So maybe I should have put the Darkhold on here instead of Scarlet Witch. But
yeah, the argument there is that it's technically the Darkhold who's the villain and not 100% Wanda.
But then technically that's also a thing against Agatha Harkness. Potentially.
But also I don't really consider the Darkhold character in and of itself. So it's just a force, not really a being.
At least within the movies. Comic books, different topic, but
boo!
She cut Captain Carter's screen time in half. That's great. She unraveled the Fantastic Four before we even got them.
Her dealing with Black Bolt was mind blowing.
Poor Professor X was already paralyzed from the waist down. She made him paralyzed from the neck down. And of course, here's William Harold with the Star Trek reference.
She technically tore his head in two.
Yeah, well, she just twisted.
Anyway, frame by frame, she tore his head in two.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point being, I had her in A tier. I can hear the arguments for her being an S tier. At this point in the game, we know so much about Wanda Maximoff. She does have the benefit of us knowing a lot about her character and having had that full-fledged show on Disney Plus beforehand that introduced us to her line of reasoning as to why she has gone full Scarlet Witch mode in Doctor Strange 2. And that being, she's just a mom just trying to get back to her kids.
Yeah, you don't separate a mom from her children.
Mm-mm.
You do that, and you will see any woman, any mother become a villain, so to speak. I would argue that she would actually be a hero, but
yeah. Well.
He got shredded. That's good. That's good stuff right there.
Yeah. I was trying to think of one for Captain Marvel there, but I can't think of something that puns off of being squashed.
You mean out of all the material you were given, you couldn't bounce something off of it, or
no?
It's the shield.
Captain Marvel, not Captain America. Captain Carter. Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
he got squashed. Anyway. Scarlet Witch. I can hear arguments for her being S tier just because we've got so much characterization for Wanda. A tier for me because I don't know. I think it might be my personal bias, my somewhat bias against Multiverse of Madness, and I don't enjoy it as much as say like the first Doctor Strange or some other MCU movies. But you do have to take into consideration her that level of brutality that we were talking about, and that she is pretty hardcore in that movie.
You want to put her A?
I'm fine with wherever you want to put her. I was saying A tier, but if You're saying A or S.
I kind of want to put her B.
Well, okay, I'm fine with A or S. I don't know if I'd put her down on B. Monica Rambeau's Captain Marvel was statuesque. There you go. Got it.
You want to put her A? Like I can't see putting her higher than A. Okay, so I'll give some leniency in that this is probably going to be the closest we're going to get to see Scarlet Witch being a villain like in the comics with the whole like House of M and No More Mutants. We're probably not going to see that in the movies.
No, not when they've done this storyline already, no.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to see her back as like a villain of some sort in those. So, yeah, okay. I'll agree with her being A.
All right. I'm not saying that we need to speed run the next few, but
we could speed run a couple of these.
Well, let's practice being succinct.
So yeah, let's practice on this one. Gore the God Butcher.
Underused.
Yeah, severely underused. This is D.
Yeah, I put him at C because there is a lot of potential. There was a lot of potential there. You had Christian Bale. You had a character with a lot of great motivation behind him, and a lot of like brutality that was left off screen that they should have shown on screen. They should have given us more of the intimidation factor. Should have shown him killing some of the gods or butchering some of the gods, like his name implied. I put him at C tier. Just because he was still a really good villain. They just didn't show enough of him.
And he's one of those, like, he has a very human reasoning behind why he feels like the gods have failed him.
Yep.
This is essentially a character that's no different than, say, someone who may, for example, I'm using this only as an example, that someone who may follow, say, like Christianity, and then something happens in their life and they lose faith. He is essentially Harvey Keitel's character from Dusk Till Dawn. Used to be a firm, stern believer in that. And Chris, you haven't seen From Dusk Till Dawn. Harvey Keitel's character was a preacher whose wife died. And then he lost his faith in God for allowing his wife to die. That's essentially Gore the God Butcher. His wife died. Or was it like his daughter died?
Yeah, because he was wanting to bring her back to life.
Yeah, and then the gods just would not help him, so he's like, screw you.
Yeah.
And he loses his faith in religion, basically. Yeah, there's just so much more they could have done with him. I get it on the personal level of he's just a guy who wants at least his daughter back, his love back, but...
And Christian Bale really did a whole lot with the little that was given to Gore in that movie.
But they really did. Gore kind of Jokerish at some points, and it was really weird.
Not in the jokey haha fashion, but more of the I've just completely lost my mind at this point fashion, which I think is an okay direction to take that character.
So you said C?
Yeah. It's like what William Harold said. Gore was a C or a D with S tier potential.
Yeah.
That movie should have given more screen time to him and more screen time to Jane and her cancer situation.
Mm-hmm.
And less goat screams. Good Lord.
A lot less of the goat screams, please. Just because it was popular on the internet doesn't mean it's going to be popular in your movie.
It was popular on the internet 10 years before the movie came out.
Oh, that too. Yeah. All right, so moving on to the next one, we've got Namor, or as those of us who aren't trying to actively woo a woman, Namor. I do like him as Namor, though. This is a really good job. The way they characterized him made him of like, what was it, like Aztec descent?
Essentially.
Yeah, I think they did as good of a job as they could have, still tying him with humanistic aspects to his characterization, and still leaving him in like the tight green bikini with the wings on his ankles, which is weird, the pointy ears and whatnot. I think they did a really good job with him and made him believable.
He's the proper foil to Shuri in Wakanda Forever. Both having to now think about what it means to, well, Shuri now having to think about what it means to run a country, run the nation, essentially, and be the Black Panther in the wake of both her brother and mother's deaths. She's literally lost her entire family. And then you've got Namor on the other side, who's having to essentially fight for his people and make sure his people are protected and everything too. And yeah, there's just a whole great dichotomy between those two characters. And I think he is a proper good foil for Shuri in terms of being the leader of a civilization, of a nation, essentially. I have him as A tier. I think because of that, it's less. We're talking about less villainy, even though he does things in the movie antagonistically wise that are awful, like killing Queen Mother Ramonda. He is still, there's depth. Oh God, there's depth to his character.
There's fathoms to his character.
There's fathoms. There's leagues. Oh my God. I need to go to bed.
You're like, I quit. That's great.
I put him as A tier, but we also have a lot of people in A tier.
I'd actually put him B, just because he's one of those that like they really could have done a lot more with him. And I hope they do. I hope they do bring him back. It seems like they want to bring him back.
Yeah, we'll see. Seems like they want to bring a lot of things back that they may or may not be able to bring back.
But I want to say B. Are you okay with B?
I'd put him probably towards the top of B if that's the case.
Over Ego?
Over Ultron, at least.
You want to put him over Ultron?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, yeah, they could bring him back. They might bring him back at some point. There's probably a greater chance that we see Namor again rather than some other people who might pop up on this list.
Yeah.
I'm segueing too soon. I'm segueing way too soon. So some characters who might pop up on this list may or may not see them ever again.
I forgot who's next, so.
And that character may or may not be the next one that we talk about here. And that's going to be a fun one to talk about and fun one to try to tier rank on this list somewhere.
Oh God, yeah. Okay.
He just now clued in and realized what I've been doing this entire time.
Yeah.
Where the heck?
This is one, before we even reveal it, this character had potential. And unfortunately, this is a character that I will not blame Marvel at all. This is a character that is probably not going to get any more than we've already seen. And that is because of the dumbness of the actor portraying the character to stay out of conflicting issues in their real life. That would be Kang the Conqueror. Good Lord. So much potential. Like, yeah. Jonathan Majors was doing I have said before multiple times, I love that Jonathan Majors has portrayed the variants of Kang that we have seen before so far, whether it's Kang, He Who Remains, Victor Timely, or some of the Council of Kangs at the end of Quantumania. He has portrayed them all as separate individual characters, and he's done a phenomenal job. Jonathan Majors is a great actor. Kevin Spacey is a phenomenal actor. These people are dumb. They are ruining their careers because they can't let go of their personal demons.
We're almost 3 hours in. Kang, as a villain, so much potential there. Was going to have his own Avengers movie. I don't know what the plan or future is for him still right now. Right now, it sounds like they're kind of just, don't worry about Kang anymore. But Kang himself had so much potential. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania,
he's defeated by ants.
If that's all we get of Kang,
terrible.
Not very high on this list.
Terrible.
He should be an S-tier villain. He absolutely should be an S-tier villain. Unfortunately, right now, he is not. As it stands at this moment in time, unless they do something else with him, I had him C-tier at best.
I'll put for Kang the Conqueror, specifically from Quantumania, I'm going to put him D tier. And I'm going to put him under Yellow Jacket because he was defeated by ants.
In my mind, I actually want to wrap He Who Remains and Kang the Conqueror together, just for the sake of we might not get any more from this character, so let's put the two antagonistic-esque versions of Kang that we've seen. I say esque in terms of He Who Remains.
And that's what I'm going to question. Was He Who Remains actually villain-esque?
Esque, in a way. Sort
of.
Or
was he just a person that was giving exposition and allowing Loki and Sylvie to decide, to be the person who decides whether or not the future of time continues as is or if everything gets destroyed? He didn't actually do anything himself. He left the decision to them.
He did so with hubris.
I guess, depending on what hubris means.
He was very what's the word? It's a word.
Asshole?
I mean, no.
He could see the future.
Arrogant.
And he knew the outcome of what was going to happen based on their decision. He knew what would happen, whatever they chose.
He was arrogant. His arrogancy is why I would lean He Who Remains more villainish.
Yeah.
As a whole, keeping in mind all the different aspects of Kang that we did actually see so far, I would put him probably C tier. And that is the tier you put him at, with the hopes of maybe we could have seen more from this character.
Okay. Oh, good Lord.
2 more.
I think we are completely running out of room in that A tier, which is sad. Because High Evolutionary.
Yeah, it's not sad. High Evolutionary is my last S tier.
You have him in S?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about
I could see that.
One of the peak things that made Agatha a villain was the fact that she killed the dog. If that's the case,
yeah.
High Evolutionary is S tier. Easy. We're talking about like villains who are personal to individual character stories. We're talking about Rocket's story here. High Evolutionary is hugely personal to Rocket's storyline. Not only that, but the nature of what he was trying to do, who he was, and the fact that he didn't really care about life. He wanted to produce like the best possible life, I guess, but he didn't really care about life. He stepped on it, used it, abused it, tore it apart, put it back together, all that stuff. Look at Rocket's buddies, his animal friends, and how careless he was about them.
Yeah.
On top of that, is that Chukwudi Iwuji? I think I'm saying his name correctly.
Bless you.
Yes. That's not even funny. He did a fantastic job in this role.
He did. You never watched the Peacemaker show.
No.
He had a very predominant role in that show as well. And watching him go from that character who is supporting and then slightly becomes antagonistic, and then you realize that he's actually, while his character is supposed to be antagonistic, he chooses himself to not be antagonistic. it was a great role for that character, for the actor to portray the different levels that character goes through. And yeah, I really, when they announced him as High Evolutionary, and then we saw exactly how he was going to play it. Namely, we got to see him in that Comic-Con presentation where he showed up in costume, which was wild. Yeah, he did a phenomenal job, like nailing that character. That is exactly the character that he is in the comics.
I think villainy wise, he's up there S tier. I mean, is he a threat of a character? I don't know if I would call him a threat necessarily, but I would say the level of evil that the atrocities and the evil that he committed, that's probably the argument that I was trying to make for Dreykov. The level of evil and the atrocities that individual committed places them higher in the villainy. For him, for High Evolutionary, easy S tier on that line of thinking.
Yeah, I can understand that. All right, so last one,
F.
This is gonna be easy because we already have the slot open. Dar-Benn, F tier.
She could have been so much more too.
She's another one of those kind of like Thanos. Like, her intentions were good. They just didn't do anything with her. It could have been so much better had they. I think the movie was focusing more on the fun of the three Marvels having their powers change, that we didn't give enough time to actually develop Dar-Benn and her rationalization, her reasoning. We just took her as like, well, the Annihilator destroyed the Kree Empire and we want revenge. And there was more to her character than that, and we never got to see it.
Her trying to save her people, I really feel like they should have dived more into that and given, like, this is another example, like talking about Gore and needing more screen time for Love and Thunder for Gore's character to be able to be fleshed out a little bit more. Same. Mm-hmm. The Marvels was what, like an hour and a half, something like that?
Yeah.
Give it that extra 30 minutes and really dive into Dar-Benn's character a little bit more. Or at least 20 more minutes and dive more into Dar-Benn's character. I think you spend that screen time, you use it wisely to build up and give us a reason to understand the villain. And then we understand the conflict that Carol has with her, being the Annihilator and what all that means.
I would argue all she actually really needed to help win me over was have her actually have a scene where she sits down. She doesn't have to physically sit, but she has a good one-on-one with Carol and tells Carol, like, hey, I don't like what you did. This is why I'm doing this. And Carol's like, I understand and I'm sorry, but you can't be doing this. And Dar-Benn's like, well, it's because of you. I'm doing this. Like, if there was that kind of a conversation, like a full, I know they slightly did that briefly in the planet where everyone's singing, but I wanted more of a conversation. Like, let's really drive out the emotions out of this. That probably would have helped.
Yeah.
But we didn't get that. So anyways, yeah, F tier.
That's a shame that those two Captain Marvel villains are both in F tier, because the Captain Marvel movies are actually not bad.
No, they're not.
So it kind of flies in the face of the movie's only as good as the villain. Well, in those cases, the movies are actually better than the villains.
I will argue that the Marvels is really good, and it's primarily because of Miss Marvel. I love Kamala. Yeah, Iman Vellani does such a good job in that role.
The heir apparent to Kevin Feige.
Yeah. Do we want to move anything else around? Would you like to trade some spots on Red Skull versus whoever it is you were arguing for?
Versus whoever it was I was arguing for. Let me look at something real quick, because I might. Yeah. So the only case in the A tier that I would be willing to move down is someone that I was just okay with also being in the A tier, and that was Hela. I think we would get a lot of flack. I'm not saying that we should make decisions based on the flack that we get, but I think we would get a lot of flack if we put Red Skull above Hela. But at the same time, that's the only one that I would actually move back down out of the A tier.
Is Hela.
Yeah.
I can't see swapping Red Skull for her, though.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I want to move, and I'm almost certain you probably are not going to have a problem with it, I would want to move Dreykov to the end of C. If we're going to keep him in C tier, he needs to be at the bottom of it. Only because Gore and Kang have way more potential than he does.
Yeah.
I can't see him being above Gore and Kang.
Gore, we're not going to see any more of that potential for. There's no way they're bringing him back. And then Kang, I don't know what they're doing with him right now.
But I think
as of this stream,
those two characters had more passion in what they were trying to do than Dreykov.
My only argument for Dreykov is just the real world implication of who he was as a person and how that relates to actual real people. And that level of villainy is terrifying because it's real.
Anyways, otherwise, I'm happy with how everything else has landed, especially that S tier. That S tier is good. And the F tier is really good too.
It's only at this point, like, I would want to shift some people around in their respective tiers. So that would be kind of time consuming for the remainder of the stream to do that. So I wonder if there's see how you feel about this. Can we talk about the shifting of the individuals in their tiers off stream and then put the finalized list up on Twitter? Do you think?
I mean, possibly.
So tell everybody to go to the Twitter afterwards to see where everybody falls in line in their actual tiers. We're not shifting people between tiers, just shifting people in the tier that they're in.
I feel like that's okay because we didn't make use of the poll on here, so it's still really only the two of us having that opinion without the chat or the audience having any influence in this.
We're 3 hours deep, and I don't want to take anyone else's time anymore. So
yeah. So I'm okay with how this is. We may shift some stuff around afterwards.
I would argue that Killmonger is probably going to move up on the final list.
Yeah, that I'm okay with.
Stuff like that.
Like within the confines of the tiers, I'm probably okay with some of these people moving around.
Yeah.
Like I actually probably would still want to put Kang higher in this C tier.
Yeah.
Only because he was being led as a major villain. He was supposed to be the next Thanos. So
we'll get a finalized list together and put that up on Twitter.
Yep. But otherwise, that is going to do it for that. So let's go ahead and get Carl out here and let's switch back. However Carl does it. Carl. I still love the fact that I'm able to do all of that transition within the 5 seconds it takes Carl to remove the tier.
Yeah. So let us know if you're watching this on a replay. Let us know in the comments. Tell us what your list is. Tell us what you think. If you're willing to commit to the 3 hours on the back end, feel absolutely free to let us know. We need to read Nerds.
Yes. So Commentating Nerd did drop a StreamYard or Streamlabs in here. He has S tier. We have Thanos, Loki, Killmonger, and Hela. A tier, we got High Evolutionary, Vulture, Pierce, and Green Goblin.
He's not too far off from us right now.
B tier, we've got Ego, Wenwu, Obadiah Stane, Red Skull, and Zemo. C tier, we got Ronan, Ultron, Kingpin, Scarlet Witch, Agatha Harkness, and Namor. D tier is Kang, Yellow Jacket, Mysterio, Whiplash, Abomination, and Dreykov. And then F tier, Darbin, Caecilius, Gore, Yonrog, Malekith, and Killian.
That's a very fair list.
Yeah.
He spread them out a little bit more than we did in terms of some of those S and A tiers, but for the most part, it feels like for a lot of those, he was on along the same lines as what we were thinking too.
Yep.
Cool.
anyways, that is going to do it for the Marquee. What's it? We have next month already planned out.
Stay tuned. Ooh.
What is next month? April?
April. Ooh, we don't know if we have.
We have an idea for April, but it's not completely finalized yet. So we will be making that announcement soon.
I imagine the Marquee will also probably happen towards the back end of April. It also depends if it's connected to any movie coming out. So y'all stay tuned.
Yeah. Anyways, that is going to do it for tonight. Thank y'all for watching. Everyone who was watching live in the chat, we absolutely appreciate that. If you were watching this on a replay, thank you for watching as well. Leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you were thinking. If we did right or if there's anything you would like to change, let us know that. Either way, if you're watching this, make sure you give us a like and subscribe if you have not already. Make sure you follow us on social media at The Cinefanatics on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow me personally at RCA Reacts on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd, and YouTube.com/RCA Reacts.
And you can follow me at Chris Adams MLP on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, as well as twitch.tv/Chris Adams MLP.
Anyways, thank you for watching. It's time to end the show before I actually do lose my voice, which is happening with every syllable that I say. So thank you for watching. We very much appreciate y'all, and we will see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.